What's up, everyone? Welcome to the broadcast. You might hear a little bit of noise in the background. That's because there's a thunderstorm in my area, so I apologize for that, and please bear with me. But anyway, this hangout is going to talk about why is killing unborn children even a debate. When I look at a number of different arguments from pro-aborts, it just makes me baffled in so many ways. It just baffles me to no end. It amazes me why people even think this is even a debate. Why are we even talking about whether killing children should be a right? And they do this a number of different ways. They'll try to give a bunch of excuses as to why it's too hard to raise a child, to allowing the mother to make decisions, to even denying that the unborn is a child at all. They just try to unpack their arguments in so many foul ways. It's just beyond comprehension. I mean, seriously, why are we even looking at this as a debate? Yep, I told you it was a thunderstorm here. Yeah, I heard that flash of lightning in the back if you're watching this podcast. But anyway, yeah, why is this even a debate? It makes absolutely no sense that we're looking at this issue as something debatable at all. It is beyond me. I mean, come on, people. Do we really, really, have to even give any arguments as to why killing our own offspring should not be allowed? Is any arguments even necessary? We got to seriously think about that question. Is any arguments even necessary? A lot of people have been brainwashed in this society to think otherwise, to think that it should be a question to even be considered. And it's just disgusting that anybody would think that. Um, Give me a moment. I'm going to put this broadcast out and let people know I'm streaming live. Just give me just a moment to set things up here. Let's set a few things up here while I listen to the background noise. I don't really have a problem with thunderstorms too much. I think they can be quite relaxing in a way. I just like listening to the trickle of the water from indoors. It's just soothing in so many ways. I also like the sounds of fans too, like white noise. No, it's just one of those little weird quirks about myself. It helps me relax, helps me think, helps me sleep, meditate, helps me do a whole lot of things that just puts me in a particular zone. And I just think it's really, really cool. But anyway, I'm just getting this set up here. Just a few more moments. Bear with me, people. Okay, I'm back, but yeah, back to this issue that um, killing unborn children is even something that we're debating. It's just beyond sickening to me that this has even become a debate. And there's so many people who have to be made aware on why it's not good for this to for us to even be talking about this. I mean, not to say that we shouldn't have a conversation, but why does these even have to even be a conversation? That just goes to show you just how morally depraved our society has become. Just so, just how low people have sunk in their moral depravity that we are thinking this of as a debate at all. I mean, every last single one of us, without exception, every last single one of us started in the same place. Every last single one of us started in the womb. Every last single one of us developed the exact same way. It is beyond baffling to me that we have people talking about killing unborn children when we have all came from the same place. You were given the chance to be here, and you're talking about killing others who aren't here. Also, it's fair for you to have been given the chance to be here, but it's not fair for others to have the same chance for you to be here. It is beyond hypocritical. And they got so many arguments to try to address that point by saying things like, well, yes, my mother chose me to be here, but if she wouldn't have chose me to be here, then I wouldn't have known. As if not knowing something justifies something bad happening to you. That's just like saying there's a person in a deep coma, and then there's some sexual predator doing whatever they want with that person's body in a coma. They may not know it or feel it or know it, but that doesn't make it right. But then they'll try to say, well, the person in a coma is born, and the one who is in the womb isn't. Well, that's just an argument of location. That's all that is. That's just saying, well, the unborn hasn't gotten to a certain location, therefore it's okay. That's absolutely stupid. I gotta take some care of something real quick. I'm gonna mute my mic for a sec here. Okay, I'm gonna put a link out in the chat, and I'm gonna put a link on my the main G Plus public page. So while I set that up for you guys, just give me a second here. Okay, got a link there in the chat, and I have one on the main page. So there you go. If you'd like to enter the room and talk about this issue, then there's a couple of links available for you. But yeah, why is this a debate? Why are we even discussing this? Of course, if you're on the side that thinks there's nothing wrong with killing unborn children, then maybe you can come in here and give your argument as to why. And if you're going to come in my room, come in here with the mic. I'm not going to be talking with people who don't have mics and who's going to talk in the side chat all day. You're gonna have to have a mic to be in my room and actually talk live. That's how I'm gonna be doing things in my hangouts. You're gonna have a mic and you're gonna talk live. If you don't want to talk live, then you can't be in my room. I'm not gonna deal with people who are text warriors all day. Who wants to be those text warriors, so to speak. But anyway, we all came from the same place. And we all should give other people that same right and dignity. What's up, the doctor? How you doing?
Good, and yourself?
Not too bad. So what's on your mind?
Well, I missed your last open discussion about abortion because NeoCloud had me blocked, so couldn't join that one.
Okay.
So yeah, just interested in hearing your stance and your positions and your arguments for why
Well, I
you
think
oppose abortion.
well, I'm against abortion entirely for any reason whatsoever. I'm against the intentional killing of the unborn child for any reason, period. I don't think there's anything that can possibly justify it any more than there's any reason to justify killing a child that's born. That's pretty much as simple as my position gets.
Even if it was to save the mother's life, and if you don't perform an abortion, they both die.
Well, if you are aware of what's said in the medical field, any qualified obstetrician that's worth their salt will tell you that an abortion is never required to save a mother's life, and such situations aren't even looked at as abortions at
Really,
all.
because 1 in 50 pregnancies are an ectopic pregnancy, and the only way to resolve that is with an abortion.
Well, let me ask.
If you don't resolve that, you know what an ectopic pregnancy is. I take it. Right?
Yes,
Yeah, where the egg is developing within the fallopian tube or on the ovaries or sometimes
yes.
in the stomach. Um, if you don't do anything, if you don't actually perform the abortion, it will rupture, and the mother can bleed out internally
Well, let
and
me ask
die.
you this. Oh, let's say, for the sake of argument, I were to grant allowing abortion in that circumstance. Would you then join me in banning all other abortions outside of such circumstances?
No,
You would?
no, I wouldn't. Like personally, I really, really, really hate abortion. It bugs me. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable. But and I might even, in many circumstances, regard it as immoral. But that doesn't mean that I would not permit it from a legal standpoint.
So you just told me that you would not ban abortions outside of life circumstances. So why'd you bring that up in the first place
Well, because
then?
you were saying, you said your position is under no circumstance whatsoever, and that's a very um, uncommon position.
But that's literally the first argument you did. What about abortions to
It
save the
was a
mother's
question and
life?
a slight correction because ectopic pregnancies are resolved with an abortion.
Well, that's not the reason why you support abortion. No, that's what I'm concerned about. Why did you
Well, the
bring up the
reason I
life?
can, if you like, I could tell you why.
Because it
I'm in
seems quite
favor of
clear that
women's
your position
choice.
has absolutely nothing to do with whether the mother's life is in danger or not.
Well, no, because it was a question about your position.
Okay, and you mind if
So I was just wanting clarification on your views, right? Not, it wasn't an argument or an attack or anything. I just found that odd, and I wanted a bit of information on it.
okay. So, is there any situation to where you think abortion should be banned? Do you think it should be allowed the entire 9 months? Should there be limits, or what's your position on that?
Well, I hate to ask this because it sounds incredibly pedantic and almost condescending, but people, when they talk about an abortion, they um, specifically refer to killing an unborn baby or unborn fetus. That's typically how it's presented and used. Abortion is a medical term for the premature termination of a pregnancy. A miscarriage is actually, its medical term is a spontaneous abortion. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so you could find medical dictionaries that would define an abortion where a C-section would actually be classified as an abortion, in which case I'm here today specifically under that definition because my mother had an abortion.
Okay, can I read you some
So I'm
excerpts
just
that?
wondering, like, when you use the word abortion, what exactly are you referring to? If you just say, like, well, it could, is the deliberate killing of the fetus, is that what you mean? Like,
Yes.
okay. No, I don't think that they should be able to do that up to 9 months or anything like that. There is a gray area where the fetus becomes viable, and we can't actually draw a strict line of demarcation to say, okay, now it's viable, and prior to that, it isn't.
Okay, before we get to that, I just wanted to read you what some experts had said about abortion. Obstetricians and gynecologists are the doctors who care for pregnant women. They've repeatedly said that abortion is not necessary to save the life of a mother. They've also stated while treating cancer or other conditions may cause the intentional death of a baby, that's clearly not the same as an abortion, as every reasonable attempt will be also made to save the baby. Dr. Sam Coulter Smith, master of the Rotunda Maternity Hospital, explained to Norite lives. We should not use the terms abortion and saving mothers' lives in the same sentence, full stop. It is a dreadful reflection on anyone who would actually do that. This is about saving mothers' lives, preserving dignity, and not stigmatizing anybody. These are wanted pregnancies, loved pregnancies. An intervention has to be made to save the mother's life. To call it an abortion is wrong. And here's what Professor John Bonner, the then chairman of the Institute of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, testified before a high-powered Oryctis committee. It would never cross an obstetrician's mind that intervening in a case of pre-eclampsia, I think that's how it's pronounced, cancer of the cervix, or an ectopic pregnancy is an abortion. They are not abortion as far as the professional is concerned. These are medical treatments that are essential to save the life of a mother. He also told the committee that 95% of the Institute of Obstetricians and Gynecologists survey said that they could preserve the mother's lives and health without abortion. And Professor Eman O'Dyer also addressed at the symposium saying, during my 35 years as professor of gynecology and obstetrics at University College Galway and director of the hospital department of obstetrics and gynecology, I delivered with these hands over 9,000 children in Galway. From my experience, I believe I am entitled to say that there are no circumstances where the life of the mother may only be saved through the deliberate, intentional destruction of her unborn child in the womb. At the same time, I fully support the statement from the Medical Council, of which I was a founding member, which said that to withhold necessary treatment from a woman because of pregnancy is unethical as well as professional misconduct, even though such treatment might lead to the death of her unborn child. So basically, we have here clear medical leading experts that's saying that to save a woman's life is not an abortion.
Well, to save a woman's life isn't an abortion, but an abortion could be the means of it. Sure, they may not like the words, but also listing off people who are anti-abortion doesn't really advance the argument. The fact remains that by any medical dictionary, an ectopic pregnancy, the procedure for removing that fetus, which results in its death, is an abortion.
No, these are
They don't.
medical
Even there, one of the
professionals.
people you quoted said that, oh, we shouldn't call it an abortion because it stigmatizes people. Well, that is the medical term for it. The fact that it means something different colloquially is unfortunate.
No, what you don't seem to get here is a spontaneous abortion is a miscarriage, right?
Yes, that's the medical term for a miscarriage. Yeah.
Yes. When you say abort, that root word there means to stop something. Abortion can happen in that root sense a number of different ways.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question what you were referring to earlier. You're referring specifically to the death of the fetus.
And according to these obstetricians, who are very well qualified, they're saying that they don't intentionally kill the unborn child to save a woman's life. So thus, in that particular context, you can't call it an abortion.
Well, I would have to look at. Do you have a link to it? Because I would have to actually look at the actual quotes in their full context, right?
I'll post it in the side chat here.
Because also, just because they say it, I'm pretty sure I could find other gynecologists and obstetricians who would tell them that they're completely wrong on it, and then those two would just cancel one another out.
Okay, but if you're talking about a guy who delivered over 9,000 babies, and not in one case has he ever needed to intentionally kill any of them to save a woman's life.
Well, sure, he may personally never have had to. That doesn't mean other people haven't had to perform an abortion in order to save a woman's life.
Dr.
Like, from the sounds of it, if he is telling the truth that he never had to, then he's incredibly fortunate.
Dr. Anthony Levitano also says the same thing.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure I could find a bunch of doctors from ERs, and I could probably even ask my aunt, who is a gynecologist, had she ever had to refer somebody for a surgery to actually have an abortion to save their life, and I'm sure she could probably.
I got a quick question. I have a quick question. Sure. Let's say that there are a couple of doctors who've never had the experience of inducing an abortion in an effort to save a woman's life. Wouldn't that still be an argument for ignorance? Just because they don't have that experience doesn't mean it doesn't still exist as a variable?
No, not if you're just quoting them. It wouldn't be an argument from ignorance. They're telling the truth straight down the line, like, look, I've never had to do it. And as far as the quotes go, And
No,
Antonio said, I don't think they actually ever expressed that specifically.
I mean, I'm not denying their experience. I'm granting that. I'm saying, but wouldn't that be that just because they didn't have to personally do it, that doesn't still exist as a variable as a possibility that could still happen in any like doctor's experience. That's my point. My question.
but
Yeah, so
even go
immediately
ahead.
on the link that I'm looking at, the four important points to remember that the first one is abortion is the deliberate and intentional destruction of an unborn child. No, not by any medical dictionary.
That's exactly what it is, sir.
No, it's the premature termination of a pregnancy, which is done deliberately, and the fact that the baby dies as a result of that
No,
is known, and any abortion does deliberately kill the baby in that case.
no. The attempt is to kill the child, sir. The attempt is not to leave the child alive.
Well, no, I never said that it was.
Okay, so it's the intentional killing then.
The killing is a consequence of it, yeah. It's
No,
an
that's not a
intentional
consequence.
consequence.
No, that's not just a consequence. That's literally what they do. Their intention is to kill
Well,
the
yeah, it
child
is what
because
they do, because there's no other way. We presently don't have the technology to, for example, remove the fetus and place it into an artificial womb and have it gestate there. If we
okay,
had
then you
that,
can't say it's not intentional.
that would still be an abortion. It's just in that situation the fetus would get to live.
But
Hopefully
you
we would
can't.
reach that point, but presently we're not there. So intentionally terminating a pregnancy pre-viability would intentionally kill an unborn fetus or baby.
No, the procedures that they use literally are designed to kill the child before
Well, yeah, they are
extraction
designed
out
because
the
that's how
womb.
you terminate the pregnancy.
Okay, so the intention is to kill, period. You can't get around that. That's what an
I never
abortion
said to
is.
get around it. That's what I said. It's the known, deliberate, and intentional consequence of it. Yeah.
I
No, it's
mean,
not just a consequence, it's just the actual action.
I mean, if it's ceasing potential life, I mean, like, isn't that like that's the woman's choice
Well, it's
alone?
not potential life. It is
I
life.
mean, it is her body, right? Like, that's the only thing she has at the end of the day, right?
Yes, it's her body, but does an abortion kill her body?
Like, how does it kill her body?
I'm asking you, does an abortion kill her body?
Well, no, because it's dealing with the inner workings of her body.
All right, so it's not killing her body, so what does that have to do with her controlling her body?
Well, in the case of her having pregnancy for whatever variable or reason, whether it's unwanted or the case of, I don't know, rape or incest or something of that nature. I mean, whatever the reason. I mean, if that does occur, then what she feels like doing, judged by her standard. I mean, it's really her choice and hers alone because it's her body and subject to her own will.
Well, that's very subjective. That's just like saying that
Well,
a
it's
woman.
not subjective.
Hold on. That's just like saying it's a woman's baby when the baby is newborn. Therefore, she can kill the child.
No,
It's the same
That
thing.
no, it
that's
isn't
no,
because it's
that's
not
not the same
dependent
thing.
on her body at that point.
That's not the same
The
thing.
reason why it's not subjective is because everyone has the right to bodily autonomy. No one can use your body without their consent. No one can do anything to your body without your consent.
Also, once it's outside the womb, it's biologically independent. So, I mean,
To an extent.
Born children cannot consent to being raised by anybody either, but that's not an argument to kill them.
Right, but they're no longer dependent specifically on any individual's body form to sustain itself. Anyone
Okay,
could take up that burden and raise that child if they volunteered to.
okay, but nobody is obligated to raise that child anyway. And on
And
top
well,
of
if
that,
nobody adopts it, we have decided as a society that the state would take care of it in an orphanage. and it would be put up for adoption.
But nobody has the obligation to adopt that child. That child didn't ask consent from anybody.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
obligation to raise it.
It's not where I mean
Right.
like a potential life has no consent over anything. Its consciousness hasn't even been formed yet.
Well, we
Like
can deal with that point a little later, but what I'm dealing with right now is the specific point that a newborn child did not get consent from anybody to raise it, and nobody has any obligation to raise a
Yeah, well, no
newborn
one has any
child.
obligation to it. It didn't give any consent because it can't give consent at that point.
yeah, exactly. I mean
But
that's
by your logic, we should be able to kill or abandon newborn babies or whatever have you because that newborn didn't get consent, just like the unborn did not get consent to use a woman's body.
How
that's
does that follow?
I mean that's just
Well, because you're saying
Well,
because the unborn did not get consent from the mother to use her body, therefore that gives her a right to kill. And in
no,
the same
that's
way,
not what I'm saying.
but yes,
The mother
it is.
needs to provide consent for her body to be continue to be used.
yeah. And see, here's the thing. I mean,
Just like,
it's not. Hold on.
go ahead.
Hold on, just really quick. I mean, it's not just I said it like willy nilly. I mean, there is a criteria by which I think a woman does have a right to choose in the thing. Normally, when the pregnancy is, I mean, okay, if she has accurate plans for her life, but if that just comes about like through no consequence of her own, like through rape or through incest or through like some broken like contraception or whatever, you know, in that context, you know, that whether or not she either wants to raise it or put up for adoption or abort it, that's whatever, because that's her body. It's dependent on what she thinks based on that criteria. So to strawman and say that it's essentially a newborn when we're talking about potential life, and that life is already established as self-replicating. I mean that's just not the same thing. I mean you're spinning your wheels here, and it's just not what we're talking about, or at least what I'm talking about.
Well, we can deal with one point at a time. Well, I want to deal with this issue of consent. You, doctor, said that it's her consent to give, and in the same way, it's whoever is raising a newborn child's consent to give. And if nobody gives the consent, then we can just abandon that child or kill the child or do whatever we want because nobody gives the consent for the child to be obligated to anybody.
Well, the way the society is structured is that if nobody gives consent, then the state raises it.
But the state doesn't have to give consent or have to take charge of it
So,
either.
yeah, it kind of does, actually. We've agreed on that, and we've
No, it
written it
does
down
not.
into the law.
The state can change whatever laws they want to.
Not
If the
that
state
one.
decided,
Not without completely disowning constitutions or charters of rights and freedoms and stuff like that.
well, where are you getting this obligation that somebody has to be obligated to the child? You just kind
Is
of,
child neglect a crime?
well, according to what laws say, but laws can change at any time. If the laws change
Could
that
it?
wait, if the laws change that nobody is obligated to the child, even the state, then where's your argument then?
Are you speaking of legal obligation or moral obligation?
No, I'm speaking. Well, since you brought up the point of legal obligation, I'm speaking from that context.
Okay, if the laws change such that even the state could just say, nope, no, we don't have any obligation to raise this, nobody does, and it gets left out in the cold and dies, then yeah, that's a horrible society. And within the purview of that, within the bounds of that society, they have no obligation, and they could legally allow it just to die.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and just real quick statement. Laws typically new laws either are revised or implemented, usually based on empirical evidence or new experiences that sort of more or less impact society as a whole. Just
okay. Well, let's take this to the moral point. Since you would agree that would be morally depraved for society to do that, that still does not get around the fact that even though it would be that you would think that immoral, that don't mean that it segues into an intellectual point that it takes away from the argument of consent. Because we could say it's immoral all day, but you still haven't gotten around the fact that if nobody gives consent, if nobody gives consent, and even the law allowed it, it would not matter.
Well, we can
So
leave
if
the
you,
law out of it, right? We're just
Like
talking
like
about the
like
moral aspect of it.
like
but
what
if,
like what would
but
matter?
so you think there's a moral obligation for somebody to take care of the newborn child, correct?
Me, personally? Yeah, there
Yes.
is.
Okay, so if you can derive a moral if you can derive a moral obligation, then why can't you do that same thing for the unborn?
But I could derive one for the unborn. Because
Right.
I separate the aspects of legality and morality from one another, right?
Okay, if we're
Just
separating
because
it,
I could find something like, for example, adultery. I'll, yeah, it's immoral, but I would never advocate for it to be illegal.
which yeah, you said it would be morally wrong for society to abandon a newborn, but
Yeah,
how do you know it's not morally wrong for the mother to choose to kill her child?
but
Uh,
depends on the
you want me to go first,
I
or
said, well, I said it depends on the situation. Like if somebody, for example, chose to have an abortion because they found out that the baby they're carrying didn't have the right hair color or skin pigmentation that they wanted. I would find that to be incredibly immoral.
That's a subjective argument. You're begging the question, sir.
Well, no, it isn't subjective because I do ground it in absolute principles.
What principles you just said that
Natural law.
dude, that is dependent on what someone else thinks should be or
No,
should be the
it's
case.
dependent upon
That's
the.
not an objective argument.
Do you know what objective means?
Objective means not dependent upon individuals.
Not dependent upon minds. Yeah, the truth value in this case in moral propositions we're talking about whether or not something is in fact moral, whether or not the truthness that this is moral is dependent
If
upon
you
what
hear
an
a train in the
individual
back, if
thinks.
you hear a train in the back, I apologize. I live by a train track, but anyway, when you say
Like
that
we have certain nature, and no one chose our nature. We have a shared nature as a social species, something that distinctly makes us human, that separates us from the other animals. That isn't dependent upon anyone's acknowledgement of it. We just happen to recognize that. That is an objective fact.
what you
And
did,
that's what I base my morality on.
and you based that on we just for some reason out of nowhere out the ether would do that in that sense, but there is nothing to suggest that there's any more obligation to protect the child in the womb.
even if it's life that could probably pass down
Well,
like other genes throughout the species and stuff like that, or probably have some potential for the next generation in any way. I mean, if it's already, I mean, if the life's already established, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to take care of it because it might take care of like elders or something like that in the future, like in some way or form or something like that.
Say that again.
basically, taking care of the
I mean,
child.
basically, hold on, real quick, doctor. I mean, the way I see it, if we're talking about like life as an already established newborn, right? You know, that's already like alive and like in need for food and stuff. Wouldn't it be better to like to nurture him or her or whatever and take care of it so that maybe one day it might have some positive impact on the next generation or whatever? I mean, wouldn't that not make sense? Like taking care of elders, something like this, looking after other young kids or whatever, doing that. Wouldn't that make
What,
sense?
what does this have to do with killing unborn children?
Okay, you stated in the argument, basically, if one could make, I mean, anyone can make an argument for an unborn child or a born child. No one's actually denying either one is bad. I mean, the thing is, it's really it depends on the criteria you have. I mean, the one I gave to you was with regard to context and consequence. Like what variables is the decision based on, and what consequences are going to be followed after the results. I mean, that I would say that is sort of an objective standard looking at that, because it's dependent on variables that one can measure, and it can impact potentially anyone around us. That being said, that's just the way I see it. You know.
But it
I mean,
seems to
if you're dealing with, like, for example, I mean, how would you respond, for example, to someone who had a child, but it had an incurable disease that would leave it tortured in pain if it had been born? How would you react to that?
Well, it seems to me, um, I'm gonna ask you the same question that I asked Doctor. Let's say I agree with you that we should allow abortion in such a circumstance. Would you then join me in banning abortions outside of other similar circumstances?
Um, I don't think I would co-sign with that, because it's because what you're proposing is very broad, and it would have to depend on the particular circumstances of said situation, to where I could actually say that either this is wrong or that's wrong, depending on what the evidence says. That's the way I see that.
Okay, then why'd you bring that up then? Because it seems to me you only brought up that horrific case as an exploitation for your position, not that it had anything to do with whether you would ban abortion or not. It just seems like you're just trying to exploit a horrific case to justify your argument.
Well, I wouldn't say that's an exploitation. I would say that's more an example. I mean, there are others, like, for example, if that kid is born, but it's born in poor, squalor, like an environment with parents that don't love it, don't care for them, and really has a potential of going down a bad route. I mean,
That isn't exploitation because you don't agree with making abortion illegal anyway. But then you would bring up a horrific case like that as trying to pull on somebody's heartstrings to justify your point.
Exactly. And do you know why? It's true to life. I mean, it could be like that could very well be your life or my life or doctor's life or anyone, depending on those variables, depending on the laws of physics that impact our lives. I mean, we can measure that stuff. That is objective. I mean, you can't just ignore these aspects as like, oh, they're so horrific, they're unthinkable. I mean, you have to. That's the only. I mean, that's exactly how we actually like establish these laws based on our experiences. I mean, to ignore them, I mean, you're doing a disservice to everyone if you don't take these into consideration.
But you don't think abortion should be legal, at least early anyway, at all anyway. So the fact that you would bring up that one particular case, as a more heavy weight to your point, is absolutely ridiculous because
No.
you don't think that one is any more valid or invalid than getting an abortion early term anyway.
Well, I think it was just more of a point against your position, just like as I pointed out earlier. If somebody's asking questions or presenting scenarios against your position, that doesn't necessarily they're presenting an argument in favor of their own.
That's not an argument against my position. He used a horrific case, knowing that he's not against abortion in any case, and then he just cherry picked one to exploit to justify his position.
Well, would it be
not-
justified in that situation under your view then?
I wouldn't hold on. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily cherry pick. I mean that like I said, that is true to life. That it happens. That can happen almost any day, every day. I mean, it like to say that it doesn't or to ignore it. I mean, it just. I mean, just because you're ignoring it doesn't mean it doesn't happen or that it's not taken into consideration. I mean,
No, I'm not ignoring it. What I'm saying if it's no more valid or invalid than an early term abortion that has nothing to do with that, then why would you use it?
because it still matters.
Now you are using that to try to appeal to emotion. That's what you're doing.
It has nothing to do with emotion, dude. I mean, like you can look at the statistics. I mean, this stuff is actually measured.
Yes, it is, because you're saying, oh, it would be that kind of suffering would be so bad, and you try to manipulate the point to try to pull on people's heartstrings. That's why you pick that specific case. You don't think it's any more valid or invalid than somebody engaging in consensual sex and having an unwanted pregnancy and getting an abortion.
Well, I mean, I would always endorse same. Well, I mean, I would always endorse safe sex. I mean, obviously, I mean,
You almost said same sex there.
well, yeah, I know, like, but anyway, I mean, you are for condoms or contraception. You're for that at least, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, that makes sense. There, I mean, there are some who would be against that, which would really, honestly, be against the argument in that. But yeah, I mean, that would help. I'm not against that. So, I mean, yeah, but that's the point. I mean, with me, it's not about emotion or pulling at people's heartstrings. It is based on the evidence of our experiences, what they yield, what we can learn from them, and how do we apply them in the decisions we make. So whenever I bring those up or situations like that, those are thought experiments to actually figure out what one would do given that scenario based on the evidence.
But here's the thing: you can have.
Yeah, when you say that's subjective?
Yeah, I say that's very subjective, and let me illustrate my point.
I would say when you say that's objective.
What that situations like those exist?
Measurable situations based on our experiences, learn from them, and actually taking that criteria into consideration. When you say that's an objective standard,
I would say the fact that those situations exist is an objective truth, but the basis of why you use them is not objective.
How so?
Well, because you're assuming the truth of the moral reasons for using those before you even get to your conclusion. That's being subjective.
So listening to the data and the facts that are objective is subjective.
No, data and facts are not subjective. Saying, oh, I don't like the fact that this person has to suffer, therefore I get to kill this person before they're born. That's subjective.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about alleviating suffering, are we not?
I have a question, Antonio. You keep using subjective as sort of a negative pejorative. What's wrong with subjectivity?
Well, because it's no more valid or invalid to use it in any context. Like,
well, subjective doesn't mean arbitrary.
If I were to appeal to subjectivity, then I could say that there's a child that's born who's suffering from vicious pain. Therefore, I can take a .38 caliber gun and kill her.
If we're talking about subjectivity, then that means nothing's really right or wrong. You basically do anything according to our preference.
Not necessarily.
Right.
We're talking about if we don't factor in our emotions, like a subjective aspect to something is something that we do need to consider in your moral evaluations.
Well, we have children that suffer, born children that suffer from horrific things all the time, but we don't take a .38 caliber gun and shoot them.
No, because I don't want to get into that because trust me, you don't want. Just look up Robert Latimer, and you'll understand why I don't want to get into that.
All right, so
I'll type his name in the side chat for you. But
vicious.
If, for example, I posted in the side chat there a congenital disease, typically called mermaid syndrome. If you knew prior, like let's say, for example, like as Wolf pointed out, you have the option of a woman's giving birth to a baby that's only going to live for 30 seconds, gasping for breath in agony, and then dying. Wouldn't the more merciful thing be to abort it prior to it experiencing any pain?
Well, if we appeal to your type of subjectivity, it would be.
Well, no, that's not. I'm asking you, like, in your view, which is more merciful, making something unnecessarily suffer or taking an action to alleviate a suffer? It's going to die, irrespective of whatever you choose.
I believe we
it's
should
just which one you do.
I believe we should find a way to alleviate suffering as much as possible without killing. But to just jump to killing is just intellectual laziness.
Well, no, the problem is there are conditions, for example, where a fetus develops and its lungs are calcified. Its lungs could not expand. There is literally nothing you could ever do.
Well, there's doctors who have dealt with these conditions like you have that would not say that we
I
should
don't have these
jump to
conditions.
killing. Well, not you, I mean, but dealt with the conditions.
The ones that I'm presenting, yeah.
Yes, but there are all sorts of conditions that you can bring up that doctors have addressed. Like there's this.
No one has ever survived having calcified lungs, nor could they in principle.
Especially
The
in
moment
fetus.
that you try to take your first breath, your lungs could not expand. You would just choke out before they could do anything. You would just die.
Well, there are certain things that at this time may not be possible to survive as far as we know. I definitely
at
agree with
this
that,
time,
but that doesn't mean that we have the right to intentionally kill, because there are certain terminal cancers that we haven't found cures for yet, but that doesn't mean we just kill them.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about, though. I mean,
we're talking about today.
like,
We have
we're
no
talking about
means of
alleviating-
fixing this.
Yeah, we're talking about alleviating suffering with regard to how these potential life or fetuses are born out. I mean, if they have the potential for a harmful suffering life, I mean, and we're talking about alleviating their suffering, it'd be better to just terminate it rather than allow that to go forward.
People with terminal
Because
cancers
the
can
reality of
suffer
it,
too.
because the fact of the matter is, if it's just going to suffer further and not be able to alleviate suffering in life, I mean, it's sort of pointless to have it go through that suffering. So,
Are you not aware that doctors would generally do whatever they can to try to alleviate suffering? If the mother said, "No, I'm not going to kill my child," and the doctors would do whatever they can to try to alleviate the suffering of that child.
yeah, sure, but here's the thing: doctors also take a Hippocratic oath, and they wouldn't. And I wouldn't. I'm not aware of any doctor who would fool their own patient in saying that anything is possible when the evidence shows that the fetus cannot survive outside the womb.
Nobody's claiming that anything
Or
is
if they do-
possible.
hold on, or if they do, it's going to be just suffering for its short duration of time.
Nobody's claiming that anything is possible, but diagnoses can be wrong too. If we presume that there's no possibility of survival because the diagnoses could be incorrect, for you be jumping to conclusions and you end up killing a child that may have possibly survived.
Yeah, that's why I said if the evidence showed that it couldn't. I mean, if it could, then by all means, work your hardest. But if it doesn't, I doubt they'd waste their time like that.
And there's absolutely no case to where it's not possible for a diagnosis to be incorrect, then you jump to killing the child before you even know for sure. And then,
I mean,
when a fetus is developed without a brain. That's pretty clear.
Oh yeah, I remember that one case.
No, that's several cases. There's just one case where it kind of lived.
Exactly. So if there's even one case, then why would you jump to intentional killing?
Because I said it kind of lived, and I mean it was alive in the strictest sense imaginable.
What you mean, kind of lived? Do you see how you sound?
It was very, in the most strictest sense imaginable, it was alive.
What does kind of living mean?
In the same way that bacteria is alive.
Hold on. He said kids that are born without brain.
Yeah.
Like with the absent, like I got looked up right now. Encephalopathy or something. Hang on, let me give you the link.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm very familiar with the condition. I've studied it quite a bit.
Okay, just for reference.
Yeah, that isn't a being. It isn't a person, and it's not living. Is it alive? Yeah.
Give me a break.
But so is bacteria.
There was a kid that lived past 2 with that condition, dude.
Yes, entirely hooked up to machines. He wasn't sentient. He had no agency. He had no consciousness. None of those things. It was essentially a doll.
Who are you?
I mean, the kid's missing half its head. I mean, if it's like...
You're at that point, Antonio, if you're saying that somebody can be alive without their brain, you may... like living without their brain, you may as well be saying that corpses can be alive with if you cut off their head.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially talking about
That's
tomatoes.
ridiculous.
That's what
You're
you are.
comparing a living human being to a dead human corpse. Are you
He's
serious?
not
Yeah,
living.
but
He's alive, but not
hold
living.
on. I'm tag teaming in right now. Here's the thing.
But you haven't even
Hold on, real quick. Yeah,
said
but
what the heck does living mean. You're just
there's
all these
Antonio.
I did. He has. It would have
There's
to have
one aspect to it.
intent.
There's a brain. There's a lack of brain there. Okay, the brain matter is like the brain is an important organ to an organism's body. Without that, especially with the mammals like ours, I mean, without that, I mean, you're essentially a tomato. I mean, that's it. I mean, and the fact of the matter is this is one of the variables I was mentioning. Like like in the case of like kids missing part of their brains as a result. I mean, that's a defect of the neural tubes and stuff like that. I mean, absent of that, you're just a tomato. You're not functioning well. You're not conscious.
Here's what you two are not doing. You're not actually justifying your position. You keep shifting the issue to these other cases to try to bring weight to them, but that does not, in general, justify the intentional killing of the unborn child in the womb.
Well, these are critiques against your position, not justification of ours.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned,
No, none of these are critiques against my position.
Sufficient to justify my position.
Wait, none of these are critiques against my position.
Well, it is if you're saying that it's unjustified, and you're now forced into a position of either saying that someone can live without their head.
No, but you don't even know. You didn't even know the parents of the child. So who?
It doesn't. What does the parents of the child have to do with whether or not you can live without a brain?
Because they're in a better position to know what was going on in their child than you. So you can't sit here and tell me.
He had his brainstem, and that was it. And then they hooked him up to him and kept him artificially alive.
You cannot sit up here and tell me.
We could do that with a headless corpse.
Wait, you cannot sit up here. You cannot sit up here and tell me in your ignorance.
Are you now saying that's up to the parents? Are you now saying it's up to
Wait a second. You cannot sit up here and tell me in your ignorance, sir, that there was no kind of
consciousness,
defined living or whatever going on with that child. The only people who
I
would know
defined
that,
it for you. What I meant
people who would know that is the parents. You don't know. You weren't there.
Okay, so are you now saying that it's up to the parents to determine that, to make that choice?
I'm not saying it's up to anybody to determine whether human beings should be killed or not. What I'm saying is for him to presume that that child wasn't like living in a sense like the rest of us. You don't know that for a fact at all because you weren't there.
Okay, but what if they're
Are
missing?
you saying that a headless corpse
What if they're missing their brain though?
be living?
We're not talking about a headless. We're not talking about a headless corpse.
Remove the brain
No,
from
we're
someone's
not.
head. It's the exact same thing.
Okay.
No brain.
Were you there raising that child?
They weren't raising it. It was hooked up to a machine.
What?
Yes.
You tell
It
them.
wasn't walking around
Wait a
talking
minute.
and eating by itself.
Wait a minute.
It was entirely
parents-
artificially kept alive.
So parents don't
There was no
raise children.
person there.
Okay.
This is your arbitrary, subjective opinion. You weren't there when those parents were there.
Well, then answer my question.
Okay, hold
Would
on.
someone remain alive if you cut off their head?
Okay, I'm reading this right now because let's get a third party.
But you cannot say that that's.
Then how can someone be alive without their brain?
No, quit interrupting me, dude. You cannot say that was equivalent to.
How can somebody be alive without their brain? Could they be alive without their brain?
You weren't there. You don't.
It doesn't matter if I was there. Answer the question. Could someone be alive without their brain?
No, stop interrupting me, dude. The point is, you was not there when those people were raising their children. You don't know how that child functioned at all. You weren't there.
Okay, I think I found a study actually, with regard to this particular like lacking of brain disease anaphylaxis. It can be diagnosed before delivery with a high degree of accuracy, although it can be a fatal condition. The option of the abortion is dependent on the abortion laws in the state. According to a 2013 report, 26% of the world's population reside in a country where abortion is generally prohibited. In 2012, they extended the right to abortion to mothers with anaphylaxis fetuses, basically fetuses born without a brain. So I mean, so it can be predicted, but it really depends on like the context and consequences of where they are, like how far the condition is, or stuff like that. But I
So is
mean,
there a chance for the diagnosis to be incorrect?
Well, there's always a chance that the diagnosis could be incorrect.
yeah, but it's
Okay,
highly
let's
Why does
unlikely.
not.
that matter?
Well, because if the diagnosis is incorrect, then that means you would have killed a human entity that would have been capable of living as you subjectively define it, just like the rest of us. Before you'd even knew for sure.
But here's the thing. In the general
Yes,
case of
definitions are
most,
subjective.
hold on. In the general case of like most kids that are like most mothers that do have these kids, it's still a fatal condition. I mean, so it doesn't negate the argument at all. You're just ignoring it.
No, what it does negate is the fact that you people are trying to say what sentience there was or was not there when you weren't even around to actually raise this kid.
Why does that matter? Like
Dude,
that's why I was
Because
asking. That's why I'm
why
asking you.
why it
This is why
matters
I was asking you.
why it matters
Do you
because if you
think
were
that
there, then
someone
you
could be
would.
alive if you removed their brain?
Of course not, dude.
And this
But
kid
that's
wasn't
not.
alive by your own admission.
But that no.
Yes,
These
you're saying
doctors,
it was a
no,
corpse.
none of these doc. This kid lived past 2 years old. Okay, no, no doctors were saying this kid was not alive. Come on, dude.
I mean,
You
but
just said he was.
yeah, but here's the thing. Hold on.
I said he was
One
alive.
story though. That's like one
He
story
had
though.
no
That's one
brain.
anecdote.
You said that you
That
can't have a brain and be alive.
What doctor said that this kid didn't
You
have a
just said
brain?
that, Antonio. You just agreed to that.
I didn't say this kid had no brain. You said that.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I
here's the
asked you
thing.
because
Okay,
that is the
now,
condition.
hold on a
He
second.
has no brain.
Well,
I mean,
that kid
this
had
is
that
one story.
condition.
This is one
That
story.
kid had that condition, but what I'm telling you is you weren't there.
Okay,
The
so
kid was
what?
Whether
diagnosed with
okay,
that
and I
condition.
wasn't there when 9/11 happened.
Hold on
That
a
doesn't
second.
stop it from actually happening.
That doesn't mean anything. I mean,
It means
so what?
everything because
It
you
means
because
nothing.
you
Well, actually, it
because you were
doesn't
saying because you were saying this kid wasn't functioning
the
like
kid's
the
not
rest of
walking
us.
around happy,
Yes, he
dude.
wasn't.
Hold on. Stop,
You
stop,
don't
stop.
know.
You could read the family's
It
testimony. He was a
doesn't
No, you
matter.
don't.
It does not matter whether or not any of us were there or not. That kid's not
Yes, it
fucking
do.
outside having a good time. He's missing half his head, dude. That's what we're
Oh,
trying to tell
outside
you.
having a
He's
good
missing
time.
half too.
Outside having a good time.
Yeah, he's not having a good time. He's freaking suffering, hooked up to machines and stuff. I mean, you can't deny that. Just because none of us were there doesn't mean we don't understand that it's a fatal disease.
There are parents with
So you
there are
denying that, and
children,
that means
there
nothing.
are children to wealthy parents who had crappy childhoods who never had a good time. That don't mean we should kill them.
That don't mean
What
that
are
is
you
not what
talking
we're
about?
talking about. That's not what we're talking about.
You said having a good time. That was your criteria.
We're talking about a freaking 2-year-old with epilepsy or whatever, or how the hell you say it.
You
Okay,
said
missing
having a
half
good
their
time.
brain.
Don't bring that up as a criteria
Missing
if
half
you're
their
not going to
brain.
stick with it.
No. You're just ignoring it. Missing half their brain. If they're missing half their brain, they're not even going to be able to function or live long enough to even have that. Okay, I mean they're going to be dead soon, so it's fatal by definition. So I mean, you ignoring that means nothing. Okay. Like it's like putting on a freaking headband like over your eyes, and it's like ignoring the truth around you. If they have that, more often than not, they're not gonna live that long. Okay, and you bring up that one story as if, oh, he made it past 02. That means something. Who
For the
freaking
record, he's
cares? Who's
dead
gonna
now, by the
die
way.
early? What?
Yes, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. But here's my thing. I understand that the child didn't have their full brain. I get that, but that does not mean that because the child had like half their brain or didn't have their entire brain or whatever, that necessarily means that the child didn't live a sentient like type life like the rest of us. None of y'all were there.
Doesn't that mean the child's on like the borderline between death and life? Like it's half dead and half alive?
No, because as I pointed out earlier, in the strictest sense, yeah, he's alive. His cells are living. But that doesn't mean he, as an agent, has any intention, sentience, and knows what's going on around him, any reasoning skills, any memory, or anything like that.
Yeah, and typically kids that are born with and not that we're talking about one, but typically kids that are born with the disorder lacks a part of their head, the telencephalon or whatever, the largest part of the brain, which includes the neocortex responsible for cognition, like cognitive thought, basically. So they're not aware
So
of anything. I mean,
basically, your argument is cognition level justifies killing if it's not at a certain point.
Well, if
No,
it isn't
I just want to
self-aware,
know that
that's not a person, in my opinion.
if they have no consciousness, if they're completely if they are completely devoid of doing everything else that humans can do, basically, and if they're just hooked up to machines and stuff like that, that's not good quality of life, dude. That's not. I mean,
Quality
I
of life.
wouldn't I
Now
wouldn't
you're
wish that
getting
on
more
anyone.
subjective.
That's not subjective. I mean, if the quality of life is basically you're missing half a head, so the only way we can keep you alive is hooking you up to artificial machines, then that's not a good quality of life. That sucks, basically. Like
Hey, Wolf,
you can't enjoy all the fullness of life like hooked up to
What
machines
does
like
that
you know.
even mean?
hey, Wolf,
Enjoying the fullness of life.
she
There's
told me
kids who were raised by wealthy parents who have all the sorts of privileges and opportunities in the
That doesn't
world. What does fullness of
that
life
doesn't apply to
mean?
the freaking no. That does not apply to the kid with missing half a head. Okay, it's just a
You
different
said all the
different
fullness of
context.
life. What does that even mean? You're not even defining that at all.
Defining what?
The fullness of life. What does that even mean?
Having a full set of experiences, like going out for a walk, like going to a party with friends, like actually being able to engage and live life. You can't do that when you're missing half a head. I
A
mean,
newborn doesn't have none of those. A newborn has none of
you're not
those
gonna be able to
experiences.
freaking leave your hospital room when you're tied to when you're strapped with machines. Do you not get that? Is that a hard concept to grasp?
A newborn doesn't have any of those experiences, but we don't justify killing
They have the
newborns.
potential to. Oh my God, you.
They have the potential to. This one
No,
doesn't. But
no,
even the
you didn't
potential
say
doesn't matter with
anything.
this.
You didn't
Okay,
say
so we've gone wildly off track here. Let's
you
try to
didn't
get
say
Wow.
you didn't
back.
say anything about the potential. You just now brought that up. Now you're moving the goalposts. You didn't
You're
say
the one
anything about the potential.
projecting here. You're projecting. You just said a
No, I'm
newborn.
not. No, I'm not. You said
You
the
are.
potential to. You just brought that up as a
You said
criteria to
you
escape
said
the
a
point. You're
newborn.
moving the
You said
goalposts,
newborn.
sir.
You said newborn. You said a newborn doesn't have that.
Yes, your
And
argument, your argument was that this child, this entity doesn't have all the fullness of life or hasn't lived all the
yeah,
fullness of
and
life, and not that it has a newborn.
what is that disease called again?
Say what?
What is that disease called again? Where you're missing where you're missing your brain? What's that
What,
disease?
what does it have to do with the fullness of life?
Did you even listen to anything I said, or did you just like was there like a white noise going in and out?
No, look, if you use a criteria, you say fullness of life, okay? And then I'd say the unborn has not lived or does not have that fullness of life yet. You cannot move the goalpost and then say the potential to.
So
That's not what you said the first
you
time.
weren't listening to me. So you weren't listening to me.
But that's not what you said the first time.
He
No,
wasn't
no,
moving.
actually-
He wasn't
actually,
moving the goalposts at all there.
Yes, he was, because he didn't say the potential to live the first time.
No,
said-
because
you
first
said
of all,
a- you
in
said
the
a
first, let me.
newborn.
Can
Do
I?
you even
Well,
know
maybe
what?
we
Do you
can
even know what?
expand this.
Hold on, stop. Do you even know what the context of what you say means? Do you even know what context means? Because when you switch it up, like you're invoking something else, and
No,
that
you switched it up.
I
You
did.
used the criteria that you did not start with. That's moving the goalpost.
When you say a newborn, so does this newborn have NS or not?
What does it matter?
Why do you keep doing that? How come every time you bring up I bring up something, you said, "What does it matter?" Are you even listening? Do you even know what like
That has nothing to do. That has nothing to do with anything.
Oh,
Because if you was going to make your point, then you should have started out with the potential for life. That's what you should have said from the start.
No, I just think you're incapable of listening. Like I hate to be mean, but like I'm just being real. Like I actually gave
No,
the criteria to you, and you just ignored most of it. Just went through like.
no, it's not. It's not my issue that you didn't straighten out your argument before you made it, sir.
I actually did. I mean, you ignored a lot of what I said. I said we were talking about kids that are born with a brain disease. Okay, and if they're missing half their head, they're gonna be hooked up to machines. It's gonna be a fatal position. A fatal position to be in. Okay, that was the context we were going in, and they're not going to be able to live long enough to enjoy any of the stuff I said. Okay, you said a newborn doesn't have the same potential, and actually they do. If they're healthy and fine, then they have the potential to live long enough to enjoy those things that I mentioned, like going to the parties or falling in love or walking on the beach or anything like that. Okay, see how context and consequence actually works, and like did you follow that?
But if we're going to use your argument about the potential, then the potential can be lost at any time. Somebody can hit their head.
We're talking about the early stages.
Somebody can hit their head and or whatever. They can get in a really bad accident and become severely mentally disabled or whatever, and lose all that further potential. That can happen at any time.
In order for somebody to lose the potential that Wolfgang is talking about, they would either have to be in a persistent vegetative state or brain dead.
Yeah.
Well,
Basically,
things can happen to people who weren't in that state previously and then get in that state later on.
because my argument is basically a kid that is a baby that is born healthy and has potential for life, whereas a baby born with epilepsy where they don't have their brain is obviously going to live shorter than that healthy kid. Like that's really simple. That's
if you're going to use the criteria that
I said what?
That if there is a potential there to have the fullness of life, and if that potential is not there,
actually it's not. Actually, that's not the quality of life.
If you're saying the potential is not there to have the fullness of the quality of life, we can justify killing. Then if that potential is lost, then we can justify killing. And that can happen at any time in any one of our lives.
Then that's not killing. I mean,
yes, it is.
It is dead.
It's killing, but it's not murder.
Yeah, it's not murder. It's not like that. That's actually what you're saying. It's not murder. Like that's what you're saying.
What? Well, are you talking about legally or morally?
I mean, okay, you're saying well. First off, that's completely like out of like controlled like human hands. If you're talking about it's just. I mean that's just a casualty. That's mortality. I mean that's not a matter of humans. It's just a matter of being in a population like that does happen. But we're talking about in the context of a kid, because this is only in the context of the brain disease. Okay, a kid that's healthy is obviously going to have the potential to have all the experiences I mentioned if it's raised right and all that stuff, because there are a lot of variables in this. If they're raised healthy and all that other stuff, they can have the potential to walk, to hang out with friends, to enjoy and have a good quality of life, a good standard of living. That's going to be more likely than a kid born with epilepsy where they're missing half their brain, hooked up to machines in a vegetative state. Like that's really simple. Like there should be no problem for you not to get that.
But if you were going to talk about potential as your criteria, then you have to deal with the same criteria once the potential is lost. Because
that's not my criteria. My criteria is the facts of the matter as they relate to the situation. Because here's the thing. Our experiences, if they are empirical, if they do make sense, apply to all of us in the real world. All right, and if you can measure them, you can by the results that come out, you can have the potential for an objective standard, and that is my standard. Okay.
Well, how is somebody?
It's not so much about you getting it. It's basically just recognizing why this stuff is a thing, and to ignore them, you're basically doing everyone else around you a disservice.
But how is somebody that ends up in the vegetative state later on that did previously have that potential, but they ended up in the vegetative state later on to where that potential is no longer there, any different than the child who started out that way?
You're talking about like a coma?
No, a persistent vegetative state is different from a coma.
Yes,
and brain death is different than a persistent vegetative state. If you're brain dead, you're dead. I'm
talking about lost potential, okay? To where they are just living artificially in the vegetative state. If they had the potential before and it was lost later on due to like a messed up accident that happened to them? How is the fact that they now in a state where that potential is no longer there any different than the child who started off with the potential not being there to begin with? What's the real difference?
Well, in one situation, we know that the potential isn't there. And
Yeah,
in the latter situation with the vegetative state, you don't know if the potential is there or not. So a lot of people don't wake up from vegetative states. So that's something that's up for the decision of your next of kin if you haven't expressed it already in a living will or to your family of what to do if you're in a vegetative state.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference with that is that when you're talking about a vegetative state later on in life, yeah, the only difference is that that happened later on in life, and if that's an issue, then that does fall on like your next of kin and everything. But yeah, you're basically just the same as a kid with epilepsy, except he or she is like way younger, and basically in a vegetative state because you're practically brain dead when you're in a vegetative state.
But you just said that you don't know.
No.
But you just said that you don't know if that potential is permanent at the later point. But now you're saying it falls
At
back
the later
on the
point,
family?
at the first point, we know that it is permanent.
But you just said it falls back on the. He just said it falls back on the family, even though we don't know at that later state it's permanent.
No, if you are in a persistent vegetative state, take me for example. If I were to end up in a vegetative state, I have a living will that expresses exactly what to do and for how long in that situation before the doctors can pull the plug and kill me.
And see, here's the thing.
Now, if I hadn't done that, that decision would entirely fall on my next of kin because they consent for me by proxy under the law. That is entirely different than the person born with half a brain.
So if there was no such will, it could still be possible that person can come out of that state, but it would still fall back on that family.
Yep, they would be the next the people that the doctors would trust to make the best, to know what my wishes were specifically. That's why they are consenting on as my proxy. They know me the best. It could be, it could have been my ex-fiance, it could have been my mother, my sister, my brother, anyone, whoever. They can argue amongst themselves, or whomever the doctors or the courts decide will be the proxy.
But you don't even know if that person could come out of that state, and you still are saying that other people can take their.
That's why we choose the next of kin. Yeah.
Yeah, and
saying that even with the potential that they could come out of it, you were still saying that they can choose to kill them.
Well, yeah, that's how next of kin works.
I got some definitions here.
So your point goes out the window when you said that it's about the possibility of them coming out of it later.
Actually,
we not because you just said that they can still choose to kill.
We can know. We can know. I mean just because it's outside your experience doesn't mean it's not known. A persistent vegetative state is a disorder of consciousness in which patients with severe brain damage are in a state of partial arousal rather than true awareness. They're not aware, but their bodies are functioning. They're still doing what they're doing. Their brains aren't working. After 4 weeks in a vegetative state, VS, the patient is classified as in a persistent or continuing vegetative state. This diagnosis is classified as a permanent vegetative state. Some months, 3 in the US, 6 in the UK. That measuring in that length after a non-traumatic brain injury, or 1 year after a traumatic injury. Nowadays, more doctors and neuroscientists prefer to call the state an unconscious or an unresponsive wakefulness syndrome. But the thing is, when you're in that vegetative state, it's really a matter of time about whether or not you could actually come back. I mean, they don't just pull the plug on you right away. It is dependent on the next of kin, what your wishes were. But if you're in that constant state to where you're not coming back after a duration of time, you're basically just a tomato at that point. You're a vegetable. You're not. I mean, your brain's not coming back. You're not conscious again. So you're practically dead there. Your body is just still alive and not even by itself, by machines. So
okay, so even if we may not know or know, let's say like a year passes and nothing changes, or 2 years passes and nothing changes, we still have no clue if that person could actually come back, but the decision can still be made beforehand, even if it was possible for that person to come back. So that, in essence, is no different than a child who starts off that way, which you said has no potential.
There is a difference in that. Do you know why we go to the next of kin? It's because
No,
those are the people who are most likely to know your wishes. That child who's born without half of his brain has no wish, and even if he did, there's no way his family could know it.
the point is somebody else would decide whether or not to intentionally kill somebody, regardless of the fact whether a person has the potential to come out of said state or not. That's the point.
Yeah, but the reasons matter, and and as you said, whether or not they come out of it. The person born without a brain is not going to grow a brain. The person in the vegetative state may come out of it, or they may not.
But here's
Those are not qualitatively identical to one another.
But that has nothing to do with anything because we're dealing with potential. We're dealing with potential.
Yeah, the first scenario has no potential.
But you're dealing with the fact that, but it doesn't matter whether there's potential or not because.
Okay, so then why are you talking about potential then?
Because y'all brought that up as a point. Somebody can still make the decision. Somebody else, wait. Somebody else can still make that decision whether the potential is there or not. So for you to use the fact about potential is irrelevant.
Okay. Yeah, we've been talking for a while now, and every time we give you an answer for something, you basically come back with anyone can make that decision or you can't know. Well, first off, this is based off of like a criteria of that doctors and scientists actually do take seriously. Even we're just reporting on, especially me. I mean, there is a criteria to judge whether a person can come out of that state or not. It really depends on time. They do actually run tests and experiments on them to see if there's anything going on up in there. But if the facts show that it's just that they're not coming out of it, I mean that's just it. Now there have been cases or misdiagnoses, but you could still measure a probability on something. And if it's more likely than not that they're not going to come out of there, I mean it's pretty much pointless to keep that person alive. I mean, to say that we could still make there's still a variable by which we can make a decision not to do this, but then we can't know either way. I mean it's ridiculous. It can't be both ways. I mean that's just completely inconsistent. It's either one or the other. But to say that we can't know or that there's no criteria for that, I mean it's incredulity. So
your argument is this. There's a potential we can't be wrong, therefore we can kill.
No, that's not what I said.
Yes, it is. That's what it comes down to. There's a potential you can know. The reality is there's a potential that you can be wrong, but you can still kill.
Okay. That's not what I've said.
Yes, it is, because you said that you just said probability. That means you could be probably correct or probably be wrong, which means there's a probability that you could be wrong. And if there's a potential that you could be wrong, you can still kill.
Antonio, how does one measure probability?
It doesn't matter.
Oh my!
It matters what is probability.
Are you serious? Are you serious?
Listen.
Say like when a person asks a question.
When you look at probability, that means something can go this way or that way. Or like for example.
Oh my God!
Like it's more like it's wow. like let's take probability for example. No. Let me make my point. Don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. Let me make my point. It's more likely than not that I will be probably alive 12 hours from now, okay? But there's a possibility that I could be incorrect. What that means is even though the probability is high that I will be alive 12 hours from now, there is a probability that I won't be, even though it's lower.
Sure. So, what are you measuring that on though?
So even if there is little, even if there's like a little possibility that you can be incorrect, that's still a possibility that you can be incorrect. Therefore, you are saying that you could possibly be wrong and still justify killing.
How do you measure what you just said? Like how do you measure like you being alive like a few hours from now over not being alive? How do you measure that?
I don't know, just based on the fact that I've consistently been alive. I don't know.
Okay, so like I mean do you go to the doctor? I mean, are you healthy? Like I mean, like is your I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, I
like
can.
the vital signs good, bro? I mean, like
Yeah,
how, I mean, there is a
yeah,
criteria for which you're measuring this. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind
because
of silly to say that you're not aware of it. I mean, there is a criteria. I mean, you are like displaying vital signs and stuff.
yeah. What I'm saying is the criteria has absolutely nothing to do with the possibility of correctness or
Yeah, it does.
incorrectness.
Yeah, it
And
does
if
because
you,
hey, hold on,
if you are
now
incorrect, but if you are
I'm gonna make my
incorrect,
point now.
what you've
I waited
done,
until you were done. I waited until
what,
you were
you,
done.
what you've done
I
is
waited
if
until you were done.
somebody is, if you are wrong, you've killed before you even know. That's what you are justifying.
With probability you're still making the statement of something being more likely than being unlikely. Okay, you saying that it doesn't matter does not make it not matter. Okay, that's ridiculous. All right, the reason people have criteria and stuff like that is basically giving a basis for how they could say something is correct or incorrect. Okay. Now the fact that you could say that you're going to be alive a few hours from now is because you're obviously aware of your health, your vital signs, your brain is obviously functioning. Like there's nothing impeding you from being able to communicate on this laptop right now. Therefore, you could pretty much trust that criteria. That is objective. Anyone can verify that you're all right. I'm pretty sure a doctor could give you a diagnosis right now saying you're healthy. So, I mean, I mean, who knows? He could be wrong, but it's more unlikely that he's not wrong based on the evidence. That's probability. I mean, it's not about certainty. It's showing about probability, making sure you can demonstrate something. So whenever a person gives you an argument based on evidence, based on some empirical data, and facts and stuff like that, you can trust it. All right, saying that the criteria doesn't matter by which one measuring the statement. There's absolutely nothing to back up your case or
But
negate another ones.
but if here's the
That is just
problem.
that's
Here's
just
the
being
problem,
possession
sir.
of argument of incredulity. That's it.
No, it's a problem. It's an argument on your side actually, because if you could be wrong, then you're jumping to killing somebody before you know. And if that is possible, all you're doing is gambling with probability. That's all you're doing.
I mean, it's not gambling when the facts actually demonstrate the case in the matter. So I mean, it's not gambling anything.
Your argument is based on chance to whether you can decide whether somebody lives or not.
No, because with like,
Probability is chance.
going back to the kid that had no brain, like I said, if that kid was born and did have that condition, it's fatal. Basically, I mean, it's not going to get far anyway. All right, it's going to be hooked up to machines. It's going to be suffering.
Yes,
So
or terminal cancers. That was fatal
suffering.
too.
So alleviating that suffering would not. I mean, it wouldn't be murder or anything like that. It would be alleviating suffering. So I mean, it doesn't have the same criteria as a healthy kid that has a brain.
What about fatal terminal cancers that are at this point in time said to be incurable?
That has nothing to do with abortion.
Yes, it does. In
No,
this particular context, because you're saying, well, that
yeah,
condition
yeah,
is
yeah.
fatal.
That's part of the thing. It's context. It's context. You're getting it now.
But you're saying that that condition could be fatal, right? But so could
It is.
certain
No, it's
cancer.
not. Could be. It is. It is.
Well, yes, just like certain cancers are known to be fatal as far as we know.
That's nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Well, if the condition is fatal as far as we're aware of, and there's no potential for it to be resolved as far as we're aware of, and it's no different in essence at all.
Yeah. The only difference is that we're discussing abortion and you're moving the goalposts.
No, I'm not moving the goalposts. You're the one who started bringing up these arguments about like brain development and diseases and whatnot. You brought that up, not me. I
Yeah,
was just addressing those arguments.
yeah, because the fact of the matter is these relate to the issue of abortion and the variables that I mentioned. I mean, it's not a black and white issue. It's not as easy as saying it's either this way or that way. It depends on variables by which you're making an equation and you're concluding an answer to. Okay, like how this person's gonna live or that. I mean, it's dependent on and that objective standard. And to say that that doesn't matter, that criteria is like there's no point to listen to that. I mean, it's just bias. It's ignoring stuff, and it's really not honest. I mean, to be honest
What
with
it
you,
comes down to is because you aren't comfortable with allowing somebody to live a certain way. You use your standards to justify whether somebody should be able to live or not. That's what it comes down to.
I mean, it's not my choice. It's not my choice that anaphylaxis is, or how you describe it, is fatal. It's not my choice. So, I mean,
It's not, but it's your
I would
choice
want
how
that.
you
I would
use
want that
it.
life to be. I don't want that suffering to be alleviated as quickly as possible. I mean, like, I don't know about you. Maybe you like kids without brains being hooked up to machines, like being kept alive in that vegetative state. I don't know,
What
but
I
I don't
like
know.
is what I like is giving those kids an opportunity to live and doing further research to see if there's ways we can resolve this. But jumping to just killing them outright, that's just intellectual laziness. You're not even giving those kids a
Sure.
chance.
Sure. Okay. Sure. I mean, if you're comfortable with kids being hooked up to machines the rest of their lives, not having any cognitive thought and being studied for so that maybe we could find some cure that we're not aware of at this moment. Sure, but I mean that kid's not gonna have the same potential you had in experiencing a decent quality of life. I mean, you're comfortable with that?
Am I comfortable with that? I'm not
Yeah.
comfortable with people using their own subjective positions to justify killing children. And yes, there's lots of suffering that I don't like and wish upon any human
Even
being.
if
But it's no
they're gonna
different.
die anyway, so
Wait, let me finish my point. But it's no different than if a kid was born and then got a terminal cancer that is said to be incurable, and they're suffering through it. It's no different than that. But you wouldn't just say, "Oh, we should just
actually
off the
it is
kid
different.
because of it."
It is different. The difference is that anaphylaxis is a fatal disease. We've been over this several times. I mean, you're not you're
It's all certain
ignoring stuff.
cancers.
Ignoring stuff is not a refutation, dude.
It's all certain cancers. So what? What's your point?
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the topic of abortion.
If you're going to say a fatal condition, then you can ignore fatal conditions of cancer.
I mean, we're talking about the issue of a kid being born without their brain. I mean, you're moving the goalpost onto cancer that they catch that child could catch later on in life, or an adult could catch later on in life. I mean, that moves away from the topic. You don't you get it?
So basically, what you're saying is because they didn't start out that way, it's magically okay to kill them,
No.
or they have to
That
start out with a fatal. They have to start
change
out
the
with a
topic
fatal
over to
condition.
abortion.
No, I'm
No,
saying they have
not
to.
abortion. You change the topic over to cancer while
You
we're
were
talking about
saying
the condition of the kid being
whatever the
born without
fatal
brain.
condition is. You were saying they have to start out with a fatal condition in the womb before we can justify killing them. That's your point.
Yeah, that's a variable in the situation. I mean, I know it's ugly. You don't want to deal with it, but it's still talked about, regardless if you personally don't care for it. I mean, like sorry to hear that, but people can't just ignore reality because it doesn't fit their narrative.
No, it
Sorry.
is ugly because it could because you have people that think it's justifiable to kill kids who get cancer later
Mostly, I
on.
mean, how do you think the parents feel? I mean, how you think the parents feel? They can't just ignore the fact their kid doesn't have a head and they're fucking suffering like hooked up to machines as a vegetable. I mean, I know that personally bothers the hell out of you, but those people and those doctors they can't ignore that. I mean, go ahead, ignore reality. I mean, that doesn't help. That helps no one. That helps no one, and that's kind of intellectual laziness yourself. I mean, isn't that hypocritical?
Neither can any parent ignore their 2-year-old child with terminal cancer they're suffering from either.
What was that?
Neither can any parent ignore a 2-year-old child suffering from a terminal cancer either. They can't ignore that any more than they can ignore a child that starts off with less of a brain than your normal average human being.
Yeah, the only
In either
difference is
cases, the
yeah,
child is suffering. In either cases, it's not something that parents can just simply ignore. And in either cases, they're fatal. But you just saying just because they didn't start out that way, it's all of a sudden different.
yeah, because we're talking about the issue of abortion. Okay, and you're moving the goalposts every time you invoke that because that's focusing on like cancer's talking about malignant cells that develop on later in life. Okay, we're talking about the aspect of a kid born without a brain, or at least that was the example that doctor pointed out that I get the definition for, and you just don't seem to want to deal
But
with.
if the condition is
Every
fatal,
time it's brought up, you either ignore it, say the criteria doesn't matter, change the subject. I mean, I mean, this isn't. I mean, you could think that if you want, but I can assure you, if you use this argument on anyone else, I mean, it's not. It's going to go pretty much the same way here. You're dodging. You're not. You don't want to really worry about it or think about it, and you're just You're just shifting along on the edge. I mean, it
wait,
doesn't help nothing.
wait, if the condition is fatal and the child is suffering, if the condition is fatal,
Yeah, and they're hooked up to machines. The only difference is, yeah. With cancer, you're not hooked up to machines. You might go through chemo, but you're not hooked up to a machine. You're still conscious. That's the ridiculousness of your argument. Okay, that's in a different context. That has nothing to do with abortion, and it really just shows your own intellectual
well,
laziness.
all you gotta do is put the child in the unconscious state with a certain type of drug. That's all you would have to
Why would
do.
you want to do that? Why that's not how is that going to cure them or help their treatment?
Exactly. It's not. But you're just sitting here talking about
No,
suffering.
that's your point. What the hell are you talking about? You're not even listening to yourself. What
Look,
if, like that does nothing.
if your point is to stop or alleviate
Oh,
suffering, then why wouldn't you want to? Why wouldn't you want to put a child suffering from cancer into a sort of sleep state so they won't be suffering?
Because that doesn't cure the cancer, you idiot. Like this is fucking sad, dude.
But it's fatal either way. It's fatal. It's fatal either way. So
dude,
you would rather be.
They're
By your,
freaking still conscious with the cancer.
by your own.
Like that's not going to alleviate the. How is putting them in a coma?
We're talking about the issue of alleviating suffering. That's your point. You're talking about the issue of stopping or alleviating suffering. If the condition is
putting them in a
either
coma
way,
is not going to cure their cancer. Oh my God, this is so dumb.
then don't use the suffering argument. Then you wasn't talking about whether
use it because you don't understand the argument. That's ridiculous.
No,
but because you don't see logic don't mean like it's a bad argument. Like
using the argument of
any real world experience should understand that shit.
Your criteria, sir.
That's just sad. What?
Oh. Your criteria was suffering, stopping or alleviating suffering. That was your point.
Why would you?
Okay, if the condition. Wait, no, let me finish. If the condition is fatal and the child is suffering, you can't cure it either way. Okay, so why would you not want to at least put the child in a sleep state so the child would not suffer?
That's not going to do a damn thing. What is that going to do? That's not going to cure them. What the? Are you even listening to yourself? Are you even listening to yourself? They don't freaking.
Sir,
with the kids with the brain thing, they don't have. The doctors don't put them in a. They don't put them in a vegetative state. That happens by nature. Okay, with the people with cancer, they get it later in life with malignant cells, and they're still conscious. The kids with the brain.
The criteria that we should alleviate or stop.
If you were not even listening to yourself, that's ridiculous.
You use the criteria that we should stop or alleviate suffering. It should not matter what the context is of the suffering is. You use the context that we should stop or alleviate suffering. Okay? Why would you not want to alleviate suffering for that child? By putting the child to sleep.
That's not going to do any damn thing. That's not going to.
But the child won't be suffering though.
Putting them in a coma is not going to put them. Is not going to cure their cancer. Do you not get that?
But it's fatal though. But it's fatal though. It's not curable as far as we know now anyway. But the child won't be suffering though. By your if we are going to
They
say that
don't.
we
The
should
doctors
alleviate or stop suffering, have more obligation to do whatever it takes to stop that child suffering with the
G-Man,
fatal cancer
forget
that they're
me.
suffering from. Period. By your own argument.
That's not my argument. You invoked it like
So
so
you
many
would
times.
not, in other
You
words,
don't
so
even
you
understand the
would,
difference. Like after I
so you would
defined it
not do,
multiple times,
so
like
you would not do what it takes to stop the suffering of a child with a fatal cancer.
okay. First off, I don't know how many freaking times I said this. Anaphylaxis, or however the hell you say it, is basically a disease, a fatal disease, in which a kid is missing half their head. Particularly the neocortex, the cognitive thought aspect of it. They are not capable of cognition like you or like me. They're not conscious at all. They're basically a vegetative state, and the only way to sustain their life is if you use artificial objects like machines, like heart monitors and all other stuff to keep them alive and sustain them. They're not conscious at all. With cancer, that is a different issue. They're usually gained by individuals who are walking around and stuff like that, malignant cells, and they're conscious. They still have their neocortex.
So,
Okay, hold on.
okay,
Putting
go
them
ahead. Yeah.
putting them in a coma is gonna do nothing, absolutely nothing, to cure them of their cancer. So you bringing that up really makes you look bad because it shows that you're not serious or even thinking remotely about the situation. And I mean, you could say this or think this in any way, shape, or form you like, but I can tell you, if you repeat this to anyone else, I can assure you that they're not going to take you seriously on anything you have to say. I mean, like not on a serious note.
So in other words, you would leave if let's say the only way to stop that kid with the fatal cancer from suffering to put them in a sleep state, you would not do it.
Hypoth- Hypothetically speaking, well, first, no evidence to show that, but hypothetically speaking, if that did magically cure them, sure, but there's no evidence.
We're not talking about cure. We're talking about fatal things that are not curable as far as we can
Not going
tell.
to alleviate that. That's not going to alleviate. Okay, that's not going to alleviate their suffering. That's just going to put them. They're not going to be conscious around for that. They're still going to die anyway. That doesn't do anything to alleviate their suffering. The cancer is still eating away at their cells, dude. Do you even know how cancer works? Do
But
you,
you,
do
but
you
you
even know?
talk about no. You talk about conscious state of suffering. Okay, conscious state.
Wow.
Okay. In either case, there would be no conscious. There wouldn't be any consciousness to even detect the suffering. If you're talking about alleviating or stopping suffering, then a way to do that would be to induce a unconscious state. That would be a way to do that.
Putting someone in a coma is not alleviating any damn thing. Okay? The case with the kid with the missing brain, it happens by nature, okay? It's pretty much the same as a miscarriage. All right? That's basically runs by like the laws of physics and stuff like that. No one determines that, okay? That no doctor says, this kid's missing a brain. The only way to make it better is to put him in a vegetative state. That happens just by nature. Okay.
Cancer happens by nature too, sir.
The difference with cancer, with your cancer example, is that it usually it usually involves cells becoming malignant. Okay. And attacking the cell growth of the body. All right. Normally the people still have their neocortex. That's not affected in there unless you're talking about brain cancer, which is a different issue altogether. But my point here is this: they are still conscious, and putting them in a sleep state is not going to do anything because it attacks the cells of the body. They don't have to be. They can be sleeping and still have the cancer. It doesn't do anything. All they doing is getting the 8 hours. They're still dying inside. Okay. So your example does absolutely nothing. It just shows that you're not.
So would you rather they be aware of their suffering? Because if they're in an unconscious sleep state, then they're not suffering. They ain't feeling it.
So this is your solution.
No, I'm going about what you're saying, because you're saying if we have a more obligation to stop or alleviate suffering or whatever, then a way to do that for a 2-year-old with terminal cancer would be to put them to sleep.
No. No, you don't. Okay, you don't understand like my criteria or basis, and you think moving the goalposts and making this dumbass straw man is
Okay, then how would you stop their suffering, sir, while they're consciously feeling it and suffering? What would you do if
okay.
not put them in an unconscious state?
Okay. Let me use an example that okay for my personal life, right? I had an uncle, right? I had an uncle that had liver cancer. Okay, he was elderly at the time. He he was he's still he had like his cognition and everything else. I mean, like usually like most people like affiliated with cancer usually have. And he went through the motions basically. He had a colostomy bag. He went through chemo and all this other stuff. They put him on experimental drugs. There was still a variable by which his life either could have been helped or maintained, but he basically used all the options available to him. He was able to still live his life to a degree. Still had to watch some things he did, but he still had some basic quality of life there. It was only until after he was taken off of the experimental drugs that all of us in the family knew that his life was winding down, and so we put his affairs in order and helped him do that, and enjoy what remaining time he had left. Okay, a kid who is and we're talking about in the context of abortion, which this variable is completely devoid of the actual topic, which I guess you're just not wanting to ignore, but whatever.
No,
This
you
kid
brought up
who's
all
born,
these
hold
other
on,
criteria,
hold on.
sir. I didn't put none of this other stuff. You did. Let's make that clear.
This kid who's born with epilepsy, they're not going to have the potential to live into old age because my uncle was fairly old, like in his 50s or 60s. Okay, they're not going to have that. They're going to be in a vegetative state. It's going to be fatal. They're going to die very soon, within a few years of life. So you like trying to make this like the same thing. It's a false equivalency. So if you want
That
to keep
was a
doing that,
2-year-old with
that's
a
fine.
terminal
But
cancer, sir. A 2-year-old with terminal cancer isn't going to live to 50 years old, sir.
that's not the same thing. I mean, I really don't know how you think this is a good argument.
What the point is this. If you're going to suggest that we
I mean,
are to
dude,
stop or alleviate suffering, then what would you do without putting them to sleep to stop their suffering for a 2-year-old suffering from terminal cancer? What would you do?
Um, I guess to sustain their life. Well, first off, it's really up to them. I mean, I would say like do chemo, do some experimental drugs, do whatever you can to sustain your life. I mean, I would encourage doctors and scientists to implement new methods to try and make this an issue that actually alleviates suffering or works forward. Like I remember they had some stuff with nanobots being able to alleviate malignant cells without harming the healthy cells. I remember that, like hearing an article based on that, and it's all about trying new ideas that actually do help the situation. But that's not the same thing as with this brain disease that early young like fetuses slash infants go into. So I mean, I still see this as a false equivalency.
So we have known
Like, how's this
ways.
the argument?
So we have known ways to stop the suffering of 2-year-olds with a terminal cancer. We have known ways to stop or alleviate their suffering while still in a conscious state. That's what you're saying, right?
No, it's not what I'm saying. If this is what you're going to do is just ignore stuff and just not focus on anything, I don't think we have anything left to discuss here, dude.
But if there's no way to stop or alleviate suffering for a child with a terminal cancer,
you
if there's no way to
ignore-
stop or alleviate suffering while they're in a conscious state,
hold
then
on.
how would you stop their suffering, sir? What would you do?
You ignored a lot of stuff that I've said, and
I asked you a direct question, you dodging it.
no, actually, I'm not. I've repeated myself over and over again, and every time I ask you questions, you just say, "Who cares? What does that matter?"
No, sir. You just admitted right here.
That does something.
You just admitted right here and now that there is no way. You just admitted right here and now that there is no way while in a conscious state. You just said that.
That wasn't relevant. You're the one who brought up cancer. That's not relevant to abortions. You keep on invoking this,
The
and then
reason
trying to
why I
prove
brought
it's
that, the
that's
reason
not
why
how
I
this stuff
brought
works.
that,
You
the
don't you
reason
don't get
why
to
I
bring
brought
it.
that.
Hold on a second. You don't get to change the subject and then try to make and then try to make a false equivalency out of two different situations. I mean, that's what you're doing, and it's really poor and it's really cheap.
Sir,
And if I could see it, I'm pretty sure anyone else can. So
but sir, I'm not changing the subject, sir. I'm dealing with. I'm not talking. I'm talking. Oh, somebody just passed by, man. But anyway,
all right.
I'm not changing the subject, sir. I'm dealing with the principle of suffering. You agree that we should
So
want to.
okay. So
Wait. Let me finish. You agree that we should want to alleviate suffering, correct? Why would that would still apply to a 2-year-old suffering with a terminal cancer, correct?
yeah, that's not like I said. It's not the same thing. I mean, dude,
How you
look,
gonna use the suffering point, not say that that doesn't apply there as the same thing?
because that's not accurate to my standard. You don't understand my standard. Like you really don't. I mean, for where we're talking about, like your hangouts tiled about abortion, that abortion issue, and you bring in cancer, which comes out at a person later in life, like before, like way after this abortion thing is even an issue at this point,
But if
and
the
saying
issue is to
that
alleviate the
hold on,
suffering,
hold on a
go
second, hold on.
ahead, go ahead.
And then saying like the only way to alleviate their suffering is to put them in a sleep state. I don't think this. It's a dumb point to try and like project upon someone, and to say that this is a good point is silly as hell. I don't believe that. So I really don't know where the hell you're going with it. Like I really don't.
But
That's not like you keep moving. You move the goalpost away from the kid with the brain because you don't want to deal with it, and then you basically try to make it a false equivalence. My uncle was pretty much conscious at the time of him getting cancer, and he was aware of the situation around him. Okay, he still had a decent quality of life. A kid that lacks a brain don't have this. So I mean, if you're gonna deal with that, deal with that. But if you're not, then I'm done. I'm just like
but what my point is this, sir. If the principle is about dealing with trying to alleviate suffering, then it does not matter. You may be dealing with two cases there, but they still fall under the same principle of do we alleviate suffering or not?
Yeah, dude, you do realize what you're advocating is, I mean, well, that's not even, it's a dumb argument. I'm sorry, dude. Listen, I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. Like, take care of yourself, okay? Like, stay in school. Seriously. Bye.
Have a good day, man. See ya. Do you hear that nonsense, Steve? You there, man? No, I guess he's away from his computer right now. But look, people, this is the nonsense you deal with when you don't have a position when you don't have a way to back up your position. You don't actually deal with the fact that it's wrong to kill the unborn, even from the conception point. What you do is you start to bring up these side issues about suffering and use those as exploitable cases to back. That's what these pro aborts do. They take issues of suffering and horrific things to deal with and use it as means as an exploitation to argue for why we should not make abortion illegal at all, at least very early term. That's what they do. They exploit these cases. They keep moving the goalposts and cherry picking cases, but they're not justifying their position. They're basically saying, well, if we can find even one case to where we can stop horrific suffering, then whoop de doo. Let's permit abortion in any case and circumstance. That's what they're doing. It's intellectually dishonest, and it's wrong. These people and how they argue is vile. Madame Cherry, if you want to come into this room and talk about this issue, then come in here. Do not be a text warrior, okay? Do not be a text warrior on my chat. If you're gonna come to my chat, then come in the room. I got a link to come in the hangout. I love it when these people talk a bunch of mess and a bunch of smack in the text comments, but then they want to come in the room. No, that's really, really cowardly to me. That's very cowardly. This is the crap you end up with when you gotta play all these mental gymnastics and do whatever you can to justify killing an unborn human being. You can't ever justify killing an unborn human being. You gotta do it by appealing to emotion with horrific cases. Like a child may not have their full brain, or a child may have a certain type of genetic deformity in the womb. It's just all these are the main arguments that they use, but neither the whole time that they're talking about these cases are they actually justifying their positions. Why are these the main cases they bring up? If they're trying to justify their position, then what they need to do is justify, by saying, okay, if the unborn does not have a right to live, then go from the conception point and argue it there. Use horrific cases of suffering to try to manipulate the discussion emotionally, to try to get people suckered in. That's what these pro-aborts do. Because the fact of the matter is, they don't believe cases outside those horrific instances should be illegal. They don't. And that's why they are exploiting them when they bring it up. This is what I cannot stand about people that argue this way. They're not being honest in the things that they say. He brought up the point that we should have a moral obligation to alleviate or stop suffering. That was his argument. It should not matter whether the child is born a certain way or whether someone later on is in a certain condition with a fatal condition that we have no known way to cure at this point in time. If you're dealing with a condition of suffering, a fatal condition, and where a person is suffering, then you should equally apply that to whether someone is born with a certain way or whether they end up in a certain way after they're born. If you really are interested in alleviating suffering, then it should not matter what case it's done in, whether initially born that way or not initially born that way. If the point is to stop suffering, why should it even matter? But he clearly was trying to make this arbitrary difference. He was trying to make this arbitrary difference that, you have to be born a certain way with a fatal condition, with a fatal suffering condition. You have to be born that way. That's stupid, okay? I'm going to just call it what it is. That's flat out stupid. He just said that you have to be born that way to try to fabricate his argument, to try to argue on faulty basis. This is why I titled this hangout, "Why is Killing Unborn Children Even a Debate?" There is no reason why this is even a debate, honestly. This This is sad. This is absolutely sad that people go to these lengths to justify killing unborn children. It is beyond me why these people are doing this. They know that their arguments would be left without any foundation. Well, it's still left without any foundation by using horrific cases of suffering. But they even more so know that they would not even have any kind of basis to argue on if they never appealed to these hard, horrific cases. They know they would not be able to justify their position even remotely if they never appealed to these hard cases of suffering and tried to pull on people's heartstrings, manipulating people with those cases. This is what these pro boards do. They manipulate people by not actually justifying their position, but by trying to do things like use hard cases and then try to attack your character by exposing the flaws and them using those arguments, those positions. It's all about trying to attack the character of the pro-lifer. And it's all about trying to exploit hard suffering cases. They don't stick to the issue of justifying abortion from conception on. They don't stick to those arguments. They want to lead you down this rabbit trail by going to these hard cases. They try to manipulate you into their position. Yes, that is a tragic thing, that children can be born into conditions to where they suffer with horrific ailments or conditions or whatever. That's horrific. But it is beyond intellectual laziness to just jump to killing. I cannot digest that for the life of me. It's horrifying. It's intellectual laziness. It's disgusting. It's murder. And the doctor who was in here earlier was saying that the child who had, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's like anencephaly or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's the condition of the brain to where a brain is deteriorated to the point to where a brain may not even be there in a human being. He was saying that that child had no kind of sentient or cognitive functions or whatever, but he don't know what that child or how that child lived. Only the parents who were there know. I understand what the condition is, but that doesn't mean that the child lived past 2 years old. There's a reason why that happened. The child had that brain condition, but still lived past 2 years old. They are in no position to say that that child lived a certain way. They weren't there. What if the parents reported something different? They weren't there the whole time. It's absolutely absurd. And he was comparing it to a corpse with their head cut off. This is the moral depravity of these people, folks. This is the hoops that they jump through to make their points, to justify the unjustifiable. I'm convinced that it is total madness. It really is total madness. Let's just call it what it is. Absolute, unadulterated, total madness. I'm gonna send this link out to a couple more friends of mine to see if they like to join the conversation. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, let's see. Got some friends to share this link with. Let's see if they like to join. Okay, let's add. All right, let's add. Tommy. Let's add. All right, Gmail. Add a number of people here. Manuel's already here. I don't need to add him. Who else I'm not thinking of? Maybe. I'll leave it at that. I think that's good enough for now. Okay, that's done. Okay, I'm back. I just want to say that I have a mission from God to expose the evil that is abortion. That's what it is. We're spending more time talking about killing people and less time about healing. Wolf King, when the guy that was in here earlier, the one that went butted heads with me about the issue of the cancer point that I brought up, and his point about the undeveloped brain of the human being. I don't lost my train of thought. I was going with that. Sorry about that, people. I just lost my entire train of thought. I'm still kind of taken aback by that whole discussion, and just that thing just went 5, 10 different ways. Just it's just sick how these people think. Not one time did they ever attempt to give an argument as to why abortion outside those cases should be justifiable. From what I can recall, not one time did they give an argument outside those cases as to why abortion is justifiable. Not once. The doctor said, "Well, I'm just addressing your position." Like, no, no, you're not addressing my position, sir. That's not my position. You're not addressing that at all. They're the ones who brought up the whole issue about children being born with certain types of diseases or with certain types of conditions to where they may seem incurable or not living or living properly or living a full life like the rest of us. They brought up those conditions, and I dealt with them on those conditions. It's funny to me how they have this need to exploit these hard cases. They have this incessant need to appeal to these cases that nobody would wish upon any human being. They can't justify their argument outside of that. They can't. They can't even justify it with that because they were jumping all over the place. It had nothing to do with the potential at all. Because I exposed that fallacy to where if someone doesn't have a living will and we don't know whether that person is going to come out a vegetative state or not after a certain amount of time, that person may have came out if we allowed them to live. But since they didn't come out after a certain amount of time, it just went to the next of kin to decide whether to take their lives or not. So even if you look at the potential to live or to get out that condition, I should say, even with that, they said that somebody else could still decide to take someone else's life, even if there was a chance that they could come out that condition. So the fact that the possibility could be there for someone to come out that condition is not an argument because they still said somebody can use that case to justify making a decision to kill another human being. It basically made bringing that up irrelevant. Even if there is a chance somebody can come out that condition, and it doesn't happen after a certain amount of time, somebody else can still make the decision. That makes bringing that whole point up irrelevant because it has nothing to do with whether somebody can or cannot come out of said position of a vegetative state. Only those who are morally depraved would feel the need to use these cases. Because I asked them both, okay, let's assume that we allow abortion in those cases. Would they didn't join me and ban abortion outside those cases or similar cases? They said no. So I exposed them bringing those cases up as a means to exploit their point for their position. I can tell that Wolfgang was getting very, very agitated because he knows the flaws of his position. That's why he was raising his voice. He started to, well, to be fair, I raised my voice a little bit too. I mean, I'm not gonna deny that. The discussion got a little passionate, so I take that back. It's not about him raising his voice or anything like that. But there seemed to be an anger in his voice. He was getting very, very angry because his lack of logic was getting exposed really, really fast. And while I'm very, very sympathetic to the sensitivity of what the ordeal his uncle dealt with, because I myself have had family members who dealt with similar situations like them. So I'm very, very sensitive to those situations. What I'm not sensitive to is using those situations to justify your position. You see, it's a lot harder to argue your position on logic early term, but it's a lot easier to try to manipulate people emotionally. It's harder to build your position on logic, but easier to build your position on emotion. But I didn't let that fly. I wasn't going to be persuaded by emotional arguments. It may be a very, very difficult thing to deal with, to see someone suffer a horrific condition that may be, as far as we know, incurable. That may be just bad. And it is bad that anybody would have to suffer. You know? I don't deny that that's messed up. But just because that may be hard for me to digest that emotionally does not mean it's an intellectual argument. You see, something may be very well hard to digest emotionally, but that doesn't make it an intellectual argument just because it's hard to digest emotionally. You can't, because I can argue all sorts of things emotionally to justify my position. I mean, I think it's horrible to kill a child. That challenged me. That challenges me hard emotionally. That anybody would justify killing unborn. That challenges me hard. But emotion is not what I build my position on. I build my position on logical reasoning. That by virtue of being a human being, you have the moral right to life like any other human being. It's that simple. The only thing that matters is that you are a human being. If you are a human being, then you have the right to live. You have the right to life. If you're not a human being, you don't. That's what it really comes down to. If they can prove that there is no human being in the womb, there's no person in the womb, then go ahead and get the abortion. Doesn't really matter. But you can justify abortion any way you want. Well, if there is a human being, if there is for intentional killing abortions are adequate. It really is that simple. You got all sorts of people that try to make this issue way more complicated than it is. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break and I'll be right back, people. All right, I'm back. I know I read this earlier, but I want to screen share something with everyone stating why it's wrong to kill an unborn child when you look at the facts of it's not a justifiable reason to do it to save a woman's life. I'm going to screen share something for you guys real quick and show you why this is wrong. Let's see here. 1 second. All right, I'm going to start a screen share real quick. If you guys can see my screen here, you see it. I think you can see it, seems like. Here we go. I'm going to show you a video here to give you some proof. Here we go.
Abortion is not needed to treat cancer. In fact, it's not needed to treat any medical condition arising in pregnancy.
So here's what I'll do.
But some abortion campaigners are misinforming women. They falsely claim that abortion is needed to save women's lives. There is zero truth in this claim. It's simply not true. And the numbers don't lie. A major review of Irish...
Sorry about that.
But some abortion campaigners are misinforming.
All right. I messed up on the screen share.
Abortion is not needed to treat cancer. In fact, it's not needed to treat any medical condition arising in pregnancy. But some abortion campaigners are...
Okay, I'm really messing up on the screen share. My apologies, people. Let me try this one more time. All right. Let's see here. It appears like you all can see my screen, so let's start this up. Here we go.
misinforming women. They falsely... Abortion is not needed to treat cancer. In fact, it's not needed to treat any medical condition arising in pregnancy. But some abortion campaigners are misinforming women. They falsely claim that abortion is needed to save women's lives. There is zero truth in this claim. It's simply not true. And the numbers don't lie. A major review of Irish medical practice has shown that pregnant women are never denied life-saving medical treatments in Ireland, regardless of our ban on abortion. In fact, the United Nations says that Ireland is one of the safest places in the world for a mother to have a baby. And the top Irish medical experts agree. They've publicly testified that there were 0 instances where abortion was medically necessary. You see, Irish doctors will always protect women's lives if conditions such as cancer arise, even if that risks the life of the baby. But this is clearly not an abortion, since there is no intention to harm the unborn child. Now, a political committee is advising the government on legalising abortion in Ireland. But the government needs to realise that the experts have already spoken, and that abortion never saves a mother's life, it just kills a baby. So let's have zero tolerance on misinforming women. Tell this government to uphold Ireland's ban on abortion. See more at thelifeinstitute.net.
Okay, that's it for that. Yeah, the evidence is clear. You don't have to intentionally kill the unborn to save a woman's life, and pro-aborts are deliberately misleading women to think you have to. Well, I'll take that back. Some may be just ignorant. I'm not going to say that they're deliberately misleading people, but I think, there's undeniably a lot of ignorance out there about the issue. Even the pro-choice, the late Dr. Alan Guttmacher said that abortion is unlikely to prolong, much less save a woman's life. Dr. Alan Guttmacher, founder of the Guttmacher Institute, a pro-choice entity. This is a pro-choice medical professional saying that abortion is unlikely to prolong, much less save a woman's life.
That's quite a killer. You got professionals. It doesn't matter what their personal biases or where they lie on the position. There are physicians on both sides of the argument that clearly recognize that abortion is not needed to save a woman's life, and at the very least is unlikely to save a woman's life. There is no need to kill the unborn child to save a woman's life. The medical experts have spoken. Don't buy the hype, people. Don't let them lead you down the rabbit hole to thinking that's the case. They're telling you a flat out lie if they think abortion is needed to save a woman's life. I'm going to screen share for you guys another video showing that abortion is not needed to save a woman's life. Let me get that video for you guys. There it goes. Hold on. Let's see. Live action. Or live action. I'm not gonna say live. I think it's actually live action. But anyway, this is gonna show why.
Did you know?
All right, I'm just trying to find the video. It should be here somewhere. Here we go. This is going to give a very apt description of why abortion isn't needed to save a woman's life. I'm going to screen share this for you guys and get it started here. I'm just going to assume y'all can see my screen here and play this video for you.
My name is Dr. Anthony Levitino. I'm a practicing obstetrician gynecologist and I've performed over 1,200 abortions. Today I'm going to describe a second trimester surgical abortion called...
The volume seems kind of low and I got my volume all the way up. I don't know what's going on here. Just try to listen closely if you can. I apologize for the lack of volume. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it any higher.
Dilatation and evacuation practicing obstetrician gynecologist, and I've performed over 1,200 abortions. Today I'm going to describe a second trimester surgical abortion called dilatation and evacuation, or DE. The DE is performed between 13 and 24 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist uses a weighted speculum, like this one, that opens the vagina widely. Because second trimester babies are so large, this greater access facilitates a late-term abortion. Late-term abortion requires that the cervix be prepared 24 to 48 hours in advance with laminaria. Laminaria is a type of sterilized seaweed that absorbs water over 8 to 12 hours and swells to several times its original diameter. Once removed, metal dilators can be used to further open the cervix as needed. Once the cervix has been stretched open, the suction tube is placed inside. A baby at 20 weeks gestation is as big as the length of my hand, from head to rump, not counting the legs. The suction machine is turned on, and pale yellow amniotic fluid surrounding the baby is suctioned out through the catheter. If babies this big, they don't fit through catheters this size. The baby's bones and skull are too strong to be torn apart by suction alone. This is a Sofer clamp. A Sofer clamp is made of stainless steel. It's about 13 inches long. The business end is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide, and there are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. The abortionist uses this clamp to grasp an arm or leg. Once he has a firm grip, the abortionist pulls hard in order to tear the limb from the baby's body. One by one, the rest of the limbs are removed, along with the intestines, the spine, and the heart and lungs. Usually the most difficult part of the procedure is extracting the baby's head, which is about the size of a large plum at 20 weeks. The head is grasped and crushed. The abortionist knows he has crushed the skull when a white substance comes out of the cervix. This was the baby's brains. The abortionist then removes skull pieces. He removes the placenta and any leftover parts of the baby with a curette, scraping the lining of the uterus for any remaining tissue. The abortionist then collects the baby parts and reassembles them to make sure that there are 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Once all the parts have been accounted for, the abortion is complete. For the woman, this procedure carries a significant risk of major complications, including perforation or laceration of the uterus or cervix, with possible damage to the bowel, bladder, and other maternal organs. Infection and hemorrhage can also occur, which can even lead to death. Future pregnancies are also at greater risk for loss or premature delivery due to abortion-related trauma and injury to the cervix. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Dr. Anthony Levatino, and in the early part of my career as an OBGYN, I performed over 1,200 abortions. One day, after completing one of those abortions, I looked at the remains of a preborn child whose life I had ended, and all I could see was someone's son or daughter. I came to realize that killing a baby at any stage of pregnancy for any reason is wrong. I want you to know today, no matter where you're at or what you've done, you can change. Make a decision today to protect the preborn. Thank you for your time.
Okay, that's the late-term abortion procedure, to where the life-saving issues typically arise. The overwhelming majority of life-saving procedures arrive late term. That's the procedure that they use. Now, I'm going to show you the video as to why it's not necessary to use that procedure, and actually why using that procedure will actually put the mother at risk. Here's another video for you.
One of the biggest arguments of pro-abortion activists is that abortion is medically necessary. What's your position on that?
We hear all the time how abortion, including especially late-term abortion, is necessary to save women's lives. Nothing could be further from the truth. I spent 9 years working at a tertiary medical center. There are only certain hospitals in the country that are designated to take care of the really, really high-risk pregnancies. You don't want to duplicate the effort; it's expensive. So we would These hospitals get referrals from the surrounding area. Albany Medical Center in Albany, New York, where I worked, was one of them. I was faculty at the hospital for 9 years. And I saw hundreds of cases of really severe pregnancy complications, cancers, heart disease, intractable diabetes out of control, toxemia, pregnancy out of control. And I saved, in those 9 years, I saved hundreds of women from life-threatening pregnancies. And I did that by delivering them, by ending their pregnancy by delivery, either induction of labor or cesarean section. Delivering the baby. And I always tell people, in all of those years, the number of babies that I was obligated to deliberately kill in the process was zero, none. And I'll give you an example. The key point about late-term abortion that so many people miss is that it takes days to prepare the cervix. This is not a natural situation by any stretch. If you're going to dilate the cervix sufficiently, it starts off essentially as a pinpoint, large enough to dismember or tear apart a baby this big. That cervix has to be dilated, and that can take anywhere from 24 to 72 hours, especially when you're talking about later-term pregnancies. Most life-threatening situations, the vast, vast majority of life-threatening situations in pregnancy are not going to arise until 24, 25, 26 weeks of pregnancy and higher. When you're talking about that, you're talking about abortion procedures that take 2 and 3 days to prepare the cervix. I'll give you a classic example. This is a real case. A lady came to the hospital at 27 weeks of pregnancy with severe toxemia. Her blood pressure, a normal blood pressure is about 120 over 80. Her blood pressure was 220 over 160. Okay, this lady would literally be minutes or hours away from a stroke. What do you do in a situation like that? We stabilized her, brought her back, did a cesarean section, had her delivered within an hour of arriving at the hospital. She and her baby did just fine. Now, let's say we wanted to use abortion to save her life. Okay? If with that kind of blood pressure and that kind of problem, if we waited 2 to 3 days to get her cervix prepared, she would never make it. She would have been dead. And that's a perfect example. You never need late-term abortion to save a woman's life. If necessary, you accomplish the delivery. Now, did every one of those children make it because they were preterm? No. But they all had a chance. And most of them did make it.
What you're saying is so amazing, Dr. Levitina, because a lot of people never hear this. They assume when abortion is brought up that it's necessary to kill that child, sometimes to save the mother's life. But you're saying it may be necessary to deliver the baby, but you never have to purposely go and kill that child.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So why is this such a huge argument for pro-abortion advocates to say it's necessary to kill to save the life of the mother?
That argument I don't understand. In my experience over almost a decade, I never had to kill deliberately a single child to save a woman's life during pregnancy. There's a wider discussion, though. Politically, always listen very carefully to the words that are being used. We need to pass law X, Y, and Z because it protects women's health. Bill Clinton, I will be happy to sign a ban on partial birth abortion so long as it includes an exception on women's health. Well, what do they mean? Now, I have a law degree. Every lawyer knows that every single word has meaning. And what Roe didn't do was define the word health. Doe versus Bolton did. It says that health, the term health, includes a woman's physical health. Okay, but it didn't say how badly impaired her physical health had to be for it to be a problem. It includes her mental health. Okay. But again, how bad does her mental health have to be? I suppose I can imagine, I never saw one, but I can imagine a case of if a woman's going to have a psychotic break because of her pregnancy, that certainly seems like a severe mental health problem. How about she's under tremendous stress? How about, I just don't think I can cope with this pregnancy? That's mental health too. It includes her economic health. Whoa, How much money do you have to be economically healthy? Not defined. And if that wasn't enough, it includes her social health. What in blazes does that mean? What it means then when a politician says, I would be happy to support your bill so long as it has a health exception. Translation, I would be happy to support your bill so long as it contains an exception so big that the bill is of no real practical effect. I can't understand.
Just to understand the point he was making, under Dovey Bolton, abortion was justifiable under any circumstance in regards to the mental health to the mother. So you can literally think just about any circumstance, and abortion is justifiable no matter what reason you give. Mental health is so broad that you can justify that under just about any context of mental health. It, in a nutshell, makes abortion legal for any reason or no reason, all throughout 9 months of pregnancy. That's what Dovey Bolton did. But as you can clearly tell from the videos I showed you, abortion is not only not necessary, abortion is only not necessary, but in fact, it may even put a woman's health or life at risk by using an abortion to save her life. So don't let pro-aborts lead you down a rabbit trail by using the life exception, because for most of them, it's not an exception at all. It's just something that they use, like, as I said earlier, it's just something that they use to pull on your heartstrings to justify their position, because they can't attempt or even begin to justify their position any other way. That's why they try to manipulate people emotionally. They can't justify their position in any way. But if they're going to use a way to try to justify their position, then why not use the emotional appeal? Is literally the only argument that they got. Like I said, it's not even an argument that they can really use in any kind of justifiable sense. But if they were going to try to make an argument, that's literally all they got. It's trying to manipulate people emotionally. Lots of cases are emotionally very, very difficult to deal with, but that doesn't make them intellectual arguments. In no sense does that make them intellectual arguments. They came in here giving these absurd arguments. Well, the unborn child doesn't have a brain, or the child with that brain condition doesn't have a brain, or it may not be able to live a full life and all this other stuff. None of this was just even, not only is it not defined, it's just arbitrary. It's entirely arbitrary. There is no justifying their position. And you can see when you put their feet to the fire, That's what happened with the Wolf King who was in the room earlier. He got angry. It was obvious. Then kind of threw a little side sneak remark at me about going to school or whatever the heck he said. It shows you that when you expose people on the nonsense, they don't like it. The truth offends people. They don't want to hear the truth. The truth is, killing an unborn child intentionally for any reason is wrong. Period. I titled this hangout, "Why is killing unborn children even a debate?" This shouldn't even be a debate. Any argument you can give for killing an unborn child, you can give to justify abandonment or infanticide. The dude that was in here earlier, the doctor said the unborn has to be given consent by the mother to use her body, but nobody has to give consent for a born child, and it would be morally depraved for society to abandon that child or kill that child should nobody give consent. He found that a problem, but thought that there was no possibility that the same kind of problem could exist in the womb. He just pulled that moral stance out the ether, out of the sky, out of nowhere. He had none objective to base his position on why we shouldn't leave or kill a newborn that cannot get consent or has not been consented to the obligation of anyone, as opposed to a mother carrying a child in the womb who don't give consent to her child to use her womb. He was not able to find any difference between the two cases other than the fact that some arbitrary standard he pulled out the ether said, well, it's wrong. Even though the principle is still about who gives consent. He violated the principle he stood on after the child was born. This is what pro-aborts do. They use arguments and appeal to certain standards and criteria, then abandon them when you expose the weaknesses there. They don't consistently apply their arguments. If a mother does not give consent to the unborn, for her to justify killing the unborn, then why should there be no legal right to kill or abandon a born child that nobody gives consent to? He said, well, if nobody consents to the obligation, if nobody gives consent to the child, to the obligation of a newborn, then the state assumes care of it. I'm like, well, that's just the state, what the state does. That's just what the law says. The law can change at any time. He admitted that would be a morally depraved society to do something like that. But he had no answer to how there's no possibility it would be morally depraved for a pregnant woman to do the same thing. Why is there all of a sudden this standard for somebody to assume the child
the care of a born human being. Why does somebody have to assume the care of a born human being? Why doesn't consent apply then? Somebody is morally obligated to take care of the child. Somebody has to take care of the newborn child. Otherwise, the child will just be abandoned or killed, or either way, the child will be left to their death. He recognizes that would be morally depraved. But all of a sudden, it's a different case when the child hasn't been born yet. If the mother doesn't have to consent to the unborn using her womb, then why should anyone else who's not the parent have to consent to taking care of the kid after being born? Why should the state have to be obligated to take up that child? If one's own biological mother has no, or biological parent, I should say, has no obligation to the well-being of their own biological child, then why should anybody have any obligation to the child? Why should anybody? They have no argument to back that up. They don't. Nobody should be obligated. And since nobody should be obligated, then where does the threshold lie between when a conceived human has rights? Where does the threshold lie? Does the threshold allow a human being to be killed at any time in the womb? Does the threshold even get moved to allowing killing outside the womb for any human being at any time where there is no threshold at all? Where the heck is the threshold point to where we say, okay, somebody should have an obligation to take care of this child? Somebody should have an obligation to care for a child that obviously cannot care for themselves or do anything to sustain their survival. And pro-abortion never able to figure out where that threshold should lie. And that's why they argue all over the place. This is why people, pro-aborts, don't want to. Most pro-aborts that I meet don't want to have a one-on-one discussion with me. Because I've seen all the flaws and the holes in pro-aborts arguments. I've seen them all. You can't justify killing a human being no matter what you try. There's no argument that I've seen from a pro-abort that didn't have a gang of holes in it, not one. It's a very, very interesting thing to watch how these people speak when you're talking to them. In my experience with dealing with pro-aborts, they cannot stand an informed pro-lifer. They don't like dealing with someone who can see through their nonsense. They don't like someone who can see through their manipulative games. I can see through their games. I can see through their crap. I know what these people do. These people are beyond disgusting to me. When you get to hear these people talking and you paint them into a corner, their true colors start to show really, really quick. It's a product of the poison of this society. We have gotten to doing things like justifying killing human beings. It's literally the same mentality that led to the deaths of millions of the Jewish people in Hitler's Holocaust. It's literally the same mentality that resulted in the oppressive slavery of blacks in colonial times. It's the same kind of reason that's been justified all sorts of horrific atrocities throughout human history. People appealing to their subjective standards and their subjective criterion of what humans should be able to live and which ones should not. Their own personal opinions justify their position. That's what the argument comes down to. It's about making them feel comfortable, not about when they use arguments like suffering, for example, to justify their position. It's about making them comfortable. It's not even remotely about the person who's suffering. They don't care about the humans that are suffering. They don't care. If they did, they wouldn't use their pain and suffering to justify their killing position. You don't say, hey, you're suffering, you're dealing with a condition to where it harms me to watch you in that state. So by my standards, you should die. That is just unconscionable to me. The depths of their moral depravity is beyond comprehension. Like I said, this is the reason why most of these people who are on the abortion side, who argue for the abortion side, don't want to engage me in a one-on-one discussion. The nonsense will get exposed quick and they know it. As it got exposed quick in tonight's discussion, it gets exposed quick in any other discussion once you put their feet to the fire and pin them against the wall. Why is killing unborn children even a debate? Is the name of this hangout. There's no reason why this should be a debate. It is absolute insanity that this crap is a debate. I really wish that pro-abortion would stop being dishonest and stop using these horrible cases to justify their arguments. They think they can manipulate people emotionally into their position. Or if they do, that somehow has given them a solid position. Oh, abortion is not wrong all of a sudden, morally. So we can justify any and every kind of other abortion because I manipulate you into thinking that these children suffering with a genetic issue at birth should not be able to live. Well, I found a human being who doesn't have a very developed brain or brain at all. Oh, whoop-de-doo. Abortion is justifiable in any context. Really? This is the reason why they wouldn't even join me in banning abortions outside those cases. Because we know that's not why they believe in abortion. They don't believe in abortion because of the possibility that suffering may happen for a born child. They don't believe in abortion because of the possibility the child may be born with a genetic formula that seems, as far as we know at the time, is incurable. That's not why you believe in abortion. That's just the manipulative part of the issue that they use. That's not really why they believe it. They believe it because they downplay the value of the unborn. And they run with that downplayed value to build their arguments on. They can't trust their position on any sound logic or reason. They just ain't got it. They can't base their argument on any kind of sufficient moral basis whatsoever. As if suffering in and of itself is some moral wrong. Everyone can agree that physical suffering is terrible, but it does not serve to make it in and of itself a moral position against the pro-life view. Just because suffering may be a difficult thing to overcome intellectually or difficult to overcome emotionally, I mean. It's not an intellectual argument. In fact, this pro-aborts have next to no, if none at all, if any intellectual arguments at all. They
justify their position. They know abortion is wrong. They know a woman should not be able to kill her offspring, and they know the father should not facilitate that in any way, directly or indirectly. A lot of people think I'm just anti-woman for being. Nope. Not even the father should have a legal obligation to get out of his duties unless both parents agree to adopting that child out once the child is born. It's funny, it's okay for the state to assume the care of kids who, by poor logic, are unwanted. It's okay for the state to assume care of those kids, but not okay for the state to intervene or to ban abortions. They conveniently pick and choose when the state suits their argument, and when they know it doesn't, that they avoid using the state for their appeal. Things like the state is what led to the 50 million for all unborn brothers and sisters killed. Absolutely disgraceful that anybody can justify something as vicious, as malicious, as horrifying as abortion. I truly believe it is my mission from God to speak against this evil and to be a voice for the voiceless. And I will not relent in that mission. I will be faithful to that mission. We owe it to these children to protect them. We owe the world to these children. Nobody should have the right to abandon these kids, much less kill these kids. I know poor reports will try to fabricate a lot of things, like even if the parents left the kid to a loving family, to be raised by a loving family, they still abandon the child. And they try to attack those straw men and try to flip leaving the child in a loving family is the same as abandonment. There's this need for them to play all these lame mental gymnastics to argue the points. Talking about the potential to live or survive when you already argued that someone else could still make that decision, assuming that person didn't have a living will and they ended up in a coma or vegetative state. But I'm used to these sorts of arguments and responses. I've seen them for years. Liberal pro-aborts prey on the ignorance of people to argue their positions. There's probably not nothing a pro-abort can say that I haven't heard before. I've heard all the sick and twisted arguments, and they all fall in the face of truth and logic. It's a matter of just paying attention to what they say and how they say things. You gotta pay attention to detail when you're dealing with these people. Keep your ears open, keep your eyes open. Be very, very observant to the tricks they like to play. Don't let these people manipulate you emotionally or in any other sense to persuade you into their killing position. If you are a new pro-life or a pro-lifer that wants to learn how to deal with these arguments, then I recommend first you could come to me. That's the first things first, but I would just recommend doing a whole lot of study on things they like to bring up, like life-saving, allegedly life-saving abortions. Do study on that. Um, do study on typical claims they like to make, like saying abortion is 14 times safer than term childbirth. And there's answers to everything they say. None of the arguments and claims that they bring up haven't been dealt with already. None of them. I have to go to the bathroom again, people. I will be right back in a jiff. All right, I'm back. Just looking at some of the comments that was left in the chat a while back. Here's one. If there is a legal protection for unborn children, then all miscarriages will be negligent homicides. Oh, I love that one. Negligent homicides for miscarriage? Number one, that's absolutely stupid. You cannot compare an uncontrollable, undirected, spontaneous natural function that results in the death of an unborn child with the active intent to kill. That is nowhere near in the same boat. Talking about miscarriages would be negligent homicides. That is absolutely stupid. Because a spontaneous natural function that a woman absolutely cannot control is the same thing as something that she can control. Really? Negligent homicide. Wow. The ultimate straw man of these people is beyond absurd. Let's see. They have all these absurd arguments. But you get the gist of just how morally depraved these people are. I can go on for hours and hours, point to the moral depravity of these people. It is sick to death to me, the deaths these people go to justify their madness. Comparing an action that you cannot control with a miscarriage with an action you can control. That's just as stupid as arguing that if a child dies in a natural disaster while the parent was around, if a child dies in a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado or something, then that's the same as that parent intentionally taking their child's life. That's how stupid that comparison is. A hurricane that you cannot control or a tornado that you cannot control, where you may be in a situation to where you didn't intend to take the life of your child.
is comparable in the same foundation as the intention to kill with a premeditated basis. The depths of how low these people go is insane. It's absolute insanity. When are they gonna get it through their heads that this crap is sick? When are they gonna get it through their heads that this crap should not be tolerated? When are they gonna get it through their heads that none of these arguments they give for killing unborn children will they justify for born children? None of them. They really think there's some magical difference between being unborn and being born. They really think there's some sort of magical difference between the womb pathway. I can't wait to do a little editing on this video and put this on my forum for people to see. Get pro-abortion one-on-one discussions. That's what I want to see. I want more one-on-one discussions to happen. I mean, the discussion I had today wasn't too bad. I mean, it was two of them, and Manuel spoke sometimes, but I smoked pretty much the whole time. But most of the time, it was 2-on-1, and I don't mind that. I don't mind dealing with multiple pro-aborts at once. It almost makes it fair for them. But I really love doing it one at a time to where they don't have some sort of peanut gallery support group. They have to come up with their own arguments and stand on their own by themselves without any support from anyone else around them. They have to know their stuff and be able to stand on their own. And the overwhelming majority of them just don't. They don't know their stuff. They have no basis to base their positions. That's why they try the same arguments all the time. Life or health to the mother, her rights, and you're just a man, and all this other crap they come up with. It's going to come to a time to where pro-lifers are just going to have to be like, enough is enough. I do believe we are approaching that time. There's still much work to be done. I believe we got to continue attacking the culture. We got to change this culture to get people to see this issue in a new light. That's the problem. The big underlying problem here. It's been a drastic shift in the cultural attitude over the past 40 plus years. Abortion has been illegal. Been legal in the United States. I'm going to keep speaking against this evil as long as I have breath in my lungs. Only will I stop speaking against this evil over my dead body. Well, this should not be a debate. Killing children should not be a debate. You listen and speak with these people long enough, you find out exactly why it shouldn't be a debate. I'm glad that there were a few pro boards who had the backbone to come in this room and debate me on this issue. There are so many more who don't have that backbone. I would say just in the last week of them all, maybe 50, 60 plus people, maybe it was more, but a whole lot of them denied speaking to me in a one-on-one conversation. It's because they already know what's going to happen. They're going to make themselves look like total fools within the first 2 minutes of talking, if even that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this hangout because apparently nobody's going to come in here and defend their madness. But for anyone who's listening out there, thank you so much for tuning in. And even thank you to the pro boards who came in here. So with that said, that's the end of this hangout. Protect yourself, protect your family and friends, protect the unborn. God bless.